Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to day one of Scholars Portal Days 2026, the Common Thread. My name is Gabby Crowley. I'm the Client Services Librarian at Scholars Portal, and I will be your host for today. So I have a couple of housekeeping notes just to get us started here. As you will have just heard, I think the event is being recorded, and the recording will be shared, posted to the Scholars Portal YouTube channel later this month, and we'll also send that around via email afterwards. So you can keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. All presentation slides for today are now on Spot Docs, including the main event slides. So please feel free to go and download those at any time if you would like to follow along. There's a link in the slides here, but also in the chat. So you can find these slides and use any of the other links that are in there. We are very fortunate to have live captions available today in English. And I want to say a huge thank you so much to our captioner, Lori from Scribewire. Lori did our captions last year too, so we're really lucky to have Lori back again this year. If you would like to be able to view these captions, we have a couple of options. You can turn on captions for embedded captioning in Zoom. And you can find that sort of in your Zoom bar at the bottom. There's a More option with 3 dots. You should be able to see captions there, and you can turn them on. We also have the option to view these captions live in a separate browser through Stream Text, and there will be a link in the chat for that. In terms of questions and discussion for Scholars Portal Days this year, you may have noticed it's a little bit of a different format this year. In the past, we've used a webinar, so you had sort of more limited permissions. There were no mics, there were no cameras. We wanted to have a little bit more of an interactive event this year at a couple of points, particularly a crafting corner, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. But in terms of questions and discussions, we're going to continue using the Q&A in the chat as we have in the past. So please save the chat for any comments and discussion that you want to have. You are absolutely welcome to chit chat with colleagues as we go. But any questions for speakers, if you could please put those in the Q&A box specifically. Keeping these separate just helps us to keep track of questions and make sure that nothing gets lost, nothing gets missed, and that we do see and answer your question. So again, if you don't see the Q&A box right now, you'll find it in the same place as you would the captions, that little 3 dots more option. You can see Q&A there and you can open that. You are all able to submit questions, see all questions that are asked, and you can comment and upvote on any questions as well. And so for the sake of keeping things on time and running smoothly, we're just going to ask that all questions go through the Q&A. With that, we do recommend in your settings for the Q&A box, if you open it, you should be able to filter either by like most recent or most upvotes. We recommend most recent, just that way you'll see the questions in the order that they're coming in as we go through those presentations. Please be kind, considerate, respectful of one another at all times in the chat, in the Q&A, during presentations. Disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated, and anyone engaging in such behavior will find themselves removed from the meeting. So please be nice. We want to have a safe and welcoming environment for our conversations today. Because we are in a meeting format, just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted at all times, unless you are one of our presenters, and then you are welcome to, of course, unmute for your own presentation. But otherwise, microphones off at all times, even just to limit background ambient noise for the quality of the recording. If you would like to chat about the event on social media today, please feel free to use hashtag SPDays26, and you can also tag us on our accounts. We're on Blue Sky, Mastodon, and LinkedIn. And with our theme this year being the common thread and sort of having a textile theme, crafting alongside the presentation today is highly encouraged. I have my crochet next to me and may pull that out at some point. So you are very much encouraged to grab your knitting, your crochet, your needle felting, scrapbooking, whatever you're working on, and to do that as you listen to today's presentations. So to begin our programming, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that here at Scholars Portal, the land that we are working and living on, and which most Scholars Portal staff live and work on for thousands of years, has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and to gather here today together. Because we have people joining from all across the country, we do encourage you to, and beyond Canada as well today, actually, we encourage you to reflect on the land on which you're joining us from, and you're welcome to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat if you would like. We have a link to nativeland.ca here if you would like to refer to that. Okay, so agenda for today. There is, I believe there was a link shared in the chat to the full program on Spot Docs, so you can view that there. But today, we're going to get started with some opening remarks from Emily Tufts, the University Librarian at Trent University. We're going to have a keynote from Lauren Collister from Invest in Open Infrastructure. We're going to have a little crafting corner, which I will give some more instructions on when we get there. But basically, it's just a little social hour where you're welcome to chat with others on the call today and share what you're working on with crafting projects. We'll have some lightning talks. We're going to hear a Borealis update. We'll have the first of our slideshows, which is the slides of spring. We'll hear from the OCUL office for an OCUL update, and then we'll wrap up for day one. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Emily, the University Librarian at Trent University, and as of just a couple of days ago on June 1st, the new OCUL chair for some opening remarks. So Emily, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Gabby. Thank you. Gave opening remarks at Convocation this morning, and I love Convocation season because it's a real chance to celebrate all of our achievements. And Scholars Portal Day is a little bit of the same, celebrating all the amazing work we do. But I have to say, seeing 154 of my friends and colleagues in the participant list, I feel more nervous giving these opening remarks than I did this morning in a full uh, athletic center full of graduates and their families. So when Gabby asked me to deliver the opening remarks today, I felt so honored in my new role as incoming chair of the OCUL Executive Committee. And I want to acknowledge everyone who's joined us today, colleagues from across Ontario and from the broader Canadian library community. And I feel like our participation here today is what SP Days is all about. It's about the relationships and shared commitments that make our work at our individual institutions possible. I love the theme of this year's SP Days, the common thread. I think it captures something really essential about how we work together in this, which is a moment of significant change and real challenges. Across academic libraries, we're navigating finite resources, a shifting technology landscape, and an expanding scope of what our communities expect and need from us. These pressures are felt at every institution, regardless of size. And moments like these are when consortia work becomes essential. When we pool our expertise and share our infrastructure and build services together, the capacity of every member grows. At a smaller institution like Trent, we gain access to tools and services and innovations that would be out of reach on our own. And our larger members benefit from the distributed knowledge and perspectives of this broad and diverse community. Everyone, I think, is stronger for the Scholars Portal connection. Reading through this year's annual report, I was really struck by how this promise of OCUL and Scholars Portal is being fulfilled. It made me really marvel at what collective innovation has made possible in just the past year. Thinking about the Scholars GeoPortal redevelopment, which is enriching metadata and improving the discoverability and access of our rich geospatial collections. This work directly enhances how researchers and students across Ontario can find and use data. The AI machine learning program's Whisper audio to text pipeline is another new service that could help all of our member libraries of any size improve the accessibility of our audiovisual collections. And it means that we don't each have to develop this capacity independently. With over 20 institutions now live on Scolaris infrastructure, this shared national repository platform is really built and sustained through collective knowledge, expertise, and governance. And now we see Scholars Portal journals expanding to serve researchers across Canada under CRKN governance. This really broadens access to scholarly content for communities well beyond Ontario. These are not small things. These are big achievements, and they represent the kind of innovation that's really possible when we work together. The expertise that's distributed across our consortium is put to work on these shared challenges, and the infrastructure we build is scaled to serve everyone. I love the textile metaphor that's woven through this year's theme, and I think it really speaks to this well. When we think about a strong fabric, it's built stitch by stitch with attention to the integrity of the whole. And some of this work is visible and exciting with new tools and new platforms and new services, but so much of it is quiet work of maintenance and mending and ensuring that what we build continues to hold into the future. It's about enriching metadata and upgrading infrastructure and refining services through consultation with the people who use and deliver them. Our community is brought together and sustained through our collaborative efforts. And so all of this, the innovation and the maintenance, is in service to the same goal, We want to make sure that our libraries can continue to deliver on our core purpose to support teaching, to enable learning, and to advance research. And we're doing so equitably for every institution and every community we serve. And that's what the common thread makes possible. And that's really what brings us here today. So this is such a great program that the Scholars Portal team has put together. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Lauren Collister at Invest in Open Infrastructure about the power of collective action. We're going to receive updates from Borealis and OCUL that demonstrate the scope and ambition of our collaborative work at the provincial and national levels. And the lightning talks are going to bring a common thread into focus through really interesting and concrete examples from across our community. And this really demonstrates what shared innovation looks like on the ground and in practice in libraries of different sizes. I'm really looking forward to it. But before I pass things over, I want to express my really deep gratitude to Kate Davis and the Scholars Portal team for the depth and quality of the work reflected in this year's annual report, to the SPOD committee under the leadership of Talia Chung and the many working groups and experts who provide essential governance and guidance, and to Gabby Crowley for organizing today's program and the team of moderators who are going to make sure everything runs smoothly. And of course, absolutely to all of you. The role you play in sustaining this consortium can't be measured or adequately expressed. Your participation is what makes this function and what makes us matter. So this common thread is really strong because you're all a part of it. And I hope today will strengthen these connections a little further. And so without further ado, welcome to Scholars Portal Days 2026. I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Those were beautiful opening remarks, and yeah, I think I really liked your note about, the common thread is strong because we're all here, everyone's a part of it together. So, thank you so much for setting a wonderful tone for today's talks. And I'm very excited to now introduce our keynote speaker for this year, Lauren Collister. And Lauren is the Research Engagement Manager at Invest in Open Infrastructure, or IOI, where she leads engagement for InfraFinder, conducts research and consulting for open infrastructure projects, and develops official research outputs for the IOI team. Her approach to open infrastructure is grounded in a decade of scholarly communication and library publishing experience, including serving as the director of the Office of Scholarly Communication and Publishing at the University of Pittsburgh Library System, where she led a Diamond open access publisher and advised on copyright, intellectual property, and open access funding policy. She also holds a PhD in sociolinguistics and remains actively connected to the linguistics community through her work on open scholarship initiatives with the eLinguistics Foundation and the Research Data Alliance. And I'm really excited to hear how all of these different threads, pardon the pun, there'll be so many of them today, come together and inform your talk today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will pass it over to you, Lauren.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me get my screen share going. There we are. And I do not have a slide for my land acknowledgement, so I'll speak it out loud. So I'm Lauren Collister, and I'm so delighted to be here with you today. I am joining you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States, which is the ancestral land of the Adena, Hopewell, and Monongahela peoples. And those peoples were joined by refugees from many other tribes, including the Delaware, Shawnee, and Haudenosaunee, who were driven from their homelands by colonizers. So Pittsburgh has been a locus of all kinds of cultures and peoples, and I am just so privileged to live and work here. So I do work for Invest in Open Infrastructure, and today I'll be sharing with you, um, pulling together of a bunch of different threads of my work to date, whether that's on open infrastructure, on open access, as well as my background as a linguist. And I really just could not resist saying yes to the invitation today when it had this theme of the common thread. And that's because making things with my hands is one of the ways that I find solace in times like these. Now, I don't know about you all, but I just want to say I'm really feeling overwhelmed these days. We are in what feels like a perpetual time of transition in libraries and higher education. We're trying to keep pace with technical innovation, with changing access to resources, and with a scope of user needs that just keeps broadening. And we're doing all of that, many of us, with less. We have capacity constraints and finite resources that somehow seem to get more finite every year. And around all of it, a political landscape that keeps changing and shifting under our feet, adding uncertainty to work that already has asked a lot of us. And I can't really help but mention another thing that is just taking up so much air in the room. And I mean, can I just level with you for a minute? I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I have been told over and over that AI is the thing that's finally going to make our lives easier. I was sold a future where AI bots would clean my house or synthesize scientific data to fix my vehicle or, I don't know, fold my laundry. But instead, now I get huge corporations building data centers in my area here in Pittsburgh that uh, right, build up my utility costs and make everything a little bit more fraught. There's protests, there's arguments, there's all kinds of things going on. And my Roomba still can't figure out how to get out from under the couch. And now I have to refuse to upgrade it because the new Roomba is probably a surveillance device that's going to collect data about me and land me on some watch list of middle-aged cat ladies. Uh, I don't know. Um, for me and a lot of people in this room, probably, AI has done the opposite of make our lives better. It certainly made our work lives somewhat worse. It's scraping bots overloading our servers or knocking repositories offline. It's a new kind of exhausting work of figuring out whether anything we're looking at was created by a person or a machine. And it's hearing about AI tools all day, every day, in every meeting, every newsletter, every conversation. You're probably wondering, oh, is she going to talk about AI this whole time? No, don't worry, I won't. But I just want to acknowledge that I think we're all underneath of it. We have this worry. There's definitely a knot in my chest. Like, what is this doing to us? What are our students actually learning? And at what cost? And why is my laundry still unfolded? Honestly, it can feel like a battle. And it's a battle I didn't sign up for. And as a person who's living in the United States right now, first of all, I am envious of all of you in Canada. But right now, a lot of things feel this way for me. And a lot of us are worn thin and there's too much to do. It was even in the announcement for this event. Maybe you're feeling worn thin right now listening to this and thinking about all the other things that you should be doing in this moment. And that's okay. I just want to encourage everybody, like Gabby said in the opening, to just stop for a moment and be like this cat with this Roomba and push that should be doing away. Close that browser window or your email. Do something else with your hands if you struggle to pay attention. And you can doodle on your notepad or pick up that crochet project like Gabby was, or find a string and tie as many knots in it as you can while you're listening. Pet your companion animal of choice with consent, of course. Your email will still be there when you're done. And even better, I've got a link in the last slide that you can click when we're done. It contains references, additional reading, and other information about this talk, so you'll be able to just relax and listen for a while. But I'm going to come back to those feelings near the end of this talk, because I think that the way we talk about world events and these pressures like AI is part of what makes it feel so fraught and difficult. And the way we talk about a lot of things can change how we feel about them. And that's something we can actually change. And so today I want to highlight the common thread that connects us and about what we can do to restore a little bit of humanity and make the world around us just a little bit better. We're going to point our energy at the power we actually hold and the things every single person in this room can do, no matter your title, no matter how tired you are. And I want to start with a thread that might seem like a detour. Stay with me. So I mentioned that when things get to be too much, I find solace in making things with my hands. I'm a knitter myself and a hobbyist woodworker from time to time. And this is an actual photo of me showing off the cables in a sweater I knit in the middle of the 2020 pandemic when I just couldn't stop doom scrolling and everything seemed to be too much. That comfort, that act of making is something that really helps us in times when we are feeling that stress. And making itself is hard to define. I like to think of it as the act of putting pieces together so that somehow they become more than the sum of their parts. It's different from gardening or growing or tending, which might be another keynote and probably another speaker. But making here is, there's lots of examples of this. That's putting together different ingredients to make a nourishing or tasty meal. It's when you have a long piece of yarn looped together many times in an interlocking way, and it becomes a sweater that keeps you warm when the days turn cold. Or pieces of fabric sewn together into a quilt to cover someone you love while they sleep. And what's really amazing and really human about making is that it's not just us. We're part of a chain. That yarn that I used for that sweater you just saw didn't come from nowhere. Someone spun that wool into yarn for me to use. And before that, somebody dyed it that color. In fact, going further back, someone raised the sheep or grew the flax or the cotton that gave us the fiber in the first place. Did that farmer know what would become of the wool from their sheep? They might have had an idea, but they couldn't have truly known what the end product would be. And there's a real truth in that when we make, we are part of a chain of people who are all engaged in the act of making. And I like to use the same idea to think about our work in libraries and scholarly communication. Do we really know what becomes of the tools and the infrastructure that we build and we work on? We might have an idea, but we might not truly know. But you can't have an online scholarly journal or an institutional repository platform or a digital collection without a whole pile of pieces that, when put together, make something bigger than the sum of its parts. And every single one of those pieces was made and crafted by individuals. The platform that displays the documents, the table of contents, the metadata, the persistent identifiers that let anybody click a link and get where they're going. It's like magic. If you were around in like the 90s era internet, the idea of a persistent identifier is just like still a little bit of magic to me. And you can even go farther down, like the file formats, the fonts, the devices that we read on. Every one of these was built with care by somebody or a group of somebodies, maybe by somebody in the Zoom room right now. We are all collectively making, each contributing a piece to a whole that none of us can see on our own. But to put together at the end, it makes something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. So that farmer with the sheep or the dyer of the yarn, they might not understand or know about the whole sweater until it's finished. But every stitch, every material, every tool used along the way, they all matter. And that chain and that interconnectedness, that, dare I say, collective action, it's really beautiful and inspiring. But I have to acknowledge it's also a little bit scary. Because what happens if something fails? If one piece gets cut, a thread pulls, or a hole starts, there might be a bigger problem that could just get worse if it's not taken care of. What happens when, to use an example that totally happened to people I once worked with, a platform stops being supported by the browsers that display it? So those persistent identifiers might still work to lead people to the page, but if it doesn't display, they eventually lead to a dead end. Now, the text or the item itself is probably still exists. We have some backups. It's downloaded in a library or deposited in a repository or kept safe in a locks network. So we built a backup plan, and that's the good news. We do what we can. There's systemic issues. I've been thinking about this a lot lately with AI bots that are inflating usage numbers, which make readership data unreliable. So what happens when you can't collect reliable metrics anymore? Maybe for your day-to-day work, it might not be such a big deal, but then you think about the bigger implications. What do citations even mean if we live in a world of fake or bad citations generated by AI tools? And then what happens to promotion or tenure or hiring processes that are built on those usage numbers? And, when you face these big questions, sometimes I just hear people say things like they want to give up. It's too much. Then I see other people working through these challenges every day. And it's a very human experience to not be entirely certain of the future or to be even afraid of what might happen, but to take a step forward anyway. I want to introduce a concept next that comes out of my experience as a knitter that I like to apply to my work in infrastructure and libraries. And this idea has changed how I see my craft of knitting, and it applies here too. I hope you'll you might find something interesting here for yourselves. This is the idea of fearless knitting. And I've seen this phrase in two different places. It, I'm not sure who originated it, but it's in this workbook called the Fearless Knitting Workbook by Jennifer Seifert. And I've also heard Johnny Vasquez, is the gentleman on the right here on the slide. He runs a knitting newsletter and a teaching outlet called The Yarnist. He's also used this term as well. And the idea of fearless knitting at the core is don't let being afraid of messing up stop you from trying. Because it's a great thing about knitting, and a lot of fiber arts share this. If you mess it up, you can almost always just undo it and try it again or apply a fix. Because just by learning how to make something, we develop skills not just to make a thing, but to mend a thing. We don't have to throw the whole object away if something's not working out. We can do something about the problem. If a line of stitches doesn't quite look right, we can look at it and find, oh, look, I twisted my yarn the wrong way when I pulled it through the loop. So if I just undo these, then I can do it again the right way and it'll look better. Now, a key ingredient of this mindset is knowing what is permanent and what is not permanent. There are some things you can only do once. If you've ever had to cut a precious scrap of fabric or a very nice piece of hardwood, you know that saying measure twice, cut once, or even in my case, like measure 800 times over and over again and make sure you get it right. Because when you do that cut, you can't undo a cut. And in knitting, there's this idea of a steek, which I'm still working up to myself, where you actually just cut through your loops of yarn. It's just terrifying. Um, these things are real and they deserve full attention. And one of the skills involved here is recognizing those things that are permanent, that can only be done once, and giving them the care that they need. But the flip side of that skill is recognizing that most things can be mended or they can be undone and redone. And if it doesn't turn out the way you want, you take it back and try it again. And to do that, you learn skills that let you recognize the components of a problem and apply a fix. I'm going to share two examples that are totally metaphors for things that we deal with in the infrastructure world. This is my cat, Amelia. Yes, you may tell her that she is perfect and wonderful. Um, she has recently decided that the ball of yarn that I knit with is a tiny snake and it's an enemy and that she must protect us all. And the problem is her little claws that you can see some of in this photo pulled out a stitch in the piece that I was working on way back. And I don't even know how it was possible, but in the aftermath, I had a dropped stitch all the way down, maybe 10 rows back of what I was working on, like a whole line, a vertical line of problems. What did I do? Do I throw out the piece? Do I unravel it all and start over? I did not, because as a maker, I knew there were YouTube videos from others who had faced exactly this problem. And I looked up a video, I got out my crochet hook, and I took a few minutes. Okay, it was more like an hour because I had to do it and then undo it because it looked funny. But I did it and I fixed the problem. And then, it's not a world-ending mistake. Everything's okay. I had the skills that let me be my own backup and a community around me sharing what they know openly. Here's another metaphorical example. I once made a sweater, that's it in this photo. It's a lovely alpaca blend yarn. And I just didn't like how it turned out. The sleeves were too short, and then I washed it once and the length shortened and it left it cropped. And who wants an alpaca blend sweater that's cropped? It's supposed to keep me warm, not bare my midriff. I'd spent hours and hours on this, but I hated wearing it, except these problems. So I put it in a drawer for an entire cold season, untouched, unworn, all that work sitting in a drawer. And, I felt a little bit bad about it, but then just one day when I was cleaning up, I discovered that I had some extra yarn from making the sweater. And I was like, you know what? I am a fearless knitter and I am going to fix it. So I had made the edges. I had done the bind off. I knew I could unpick it. I knew how it was made, so I knew how to undo it. I knew I could just undo the cuffs of the sleeves and add length with this yarn I had found. It would be a big pain, but it was better than having all that work just sit in a drawer. So let me ask you this. What projects are like that for you? What's sitting in your metaphorical drawer? Or maybe even the opposite of my sweater. What is something that you use a lot because you've invested a lot of time in it, but it just isn't quite working right? There's a concept here, I'm sure some of you might have heard of it. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. This idea of I put so much into this, it's too late to go back now. But it combines with that fear. It's like, what if I try to do something else and it's worse? What if I unpick these sleeves and add length and it looks messy? We do this with infrastructure. We've invested so much time and energy and money into this platform. We're going to stick with it. And then the flip side, that fear of like, well, what if nobody likes the open source version? Or what if there's a mysterious hidden cost? Whether or not we actually use the platform, whether or not we actually like it, whether or not the thing we're using aligns with our mission and our purpose. We as humans are so predisposed to sticking with the familiar or the status quo, whether or not it's working for us. So I've been talking about some complaints that we all have, but the key point is this. We are makers in our craft and our work, and we are all part of a chain. There are people who come before us and after us in that chain, and there's great power in being part of this and in community. So how do we access that power in moments when everything seems to be too much? We're stretched thin in our working world, especially. And you're already doing part of this by being here today, by being part of the Scholars Portal community and your consortium. You have a community already around you, the people in the chain who can help and support you in this work, even when something's not going quite right. And I think you're very familiar with that in this community here. And so today I want to share with you another tool that you can put to use to help find solid ground and advance the work that you are doing as part of this maker chain. So it starts with a concept called reframing. And I'm going to actually reframe the concept I just introduced to you that was called fearless knitting, because I don't think of myself as fearless in this work because I am afraid I'm going to mess it up. I'm afraid I'm going to spend a lot of energy and end up with something that nobody likes and that looks bad. But you've probably heard the saying that you can't be brave if you're not afraid. And here's a version of that attributed to Beverly Smith, who's a Black feminist author and activist from near where I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States. And the idea is not to let the fear stop us from doing these human actions of making, repairing, and mending. And if we think about it, it takes real courage to say this isn't working or something is wrong and we need to fix it. And that goes in our knitting or our sewing or our woodworking and in our work as librarians and open infrastructure creators. And I know, some days it feels like we have to be courageous all day long against publishers trying to enclose the world's knowledge and charge us to read it, against software companies selling us an easy package while compromising data and privacy, against AI tools that trade truth for a fast answer. It's all very easy to feel exhausted and powerless. So what do? We create, we make, we mend. We find power in bringing something into existence that did not exist before. Out of taking something that is wrong in our world and making it a little bit better. Making is a very human action, but we don't just make things with our hands or our code for you digital infrastructure folks. I want to turn to another way that we make things in the world, another very human thing to do, and that is with our language. For this part, I want to go back to my roots and introduce you to a concept that I spent many years digging at until I realized that it's not magic. It's just paying attention and using our skills. So if you spent 5 seconds searching for my name on the internet, or if you listen to Gabby introduce me, you'll find out that I'm a linguist by training, and specifically, I'm a sociolinguist, which is sort of a mix of a sociologist, an anthropologist, and a linguist. And yes, my grade school teachers did really tell me to pick just one thing, and I have been ignoring them ever since. But it's resulted in this. Here's the thing that sociolinguists study. It's how people use language to communicate with each other and how in doing that, we as Humans, as people, we actively shape the world around us. Let me give you some examples of how we see and do this every day and how we use the power embedded in language and even the smallest of interactions. So, you know that moment in a romance novel or in a film when one of our protagonists accidentally blurts out, "I love you," and then they freeze because suddenly everything has changed. In that one act of language, they gave name to a feeling or a relationship. And that person has called a new state of existence into being. And yes, there's great power in that, but there's also this fear, you know, does this other person share that feeling? Do they want to participate with me in this new state of existence that I have suddenly created between us? And we do this all the time. We have so many examples of this. So it can be as formal as an officiant saying, "I now pronounce you legally married." And suddenly your tax filing status changes, and some other things. But it can also be something small and everyday, a different choice of words, like Sandy is my coworker versus Sandy is my friend. Same person, but the word you pick changes the nature of the relationship. And even the order that you put words into matters. There was this synthesis study in 2019 that really showed the importance of what is called the primacy effect, which is when you have a list of things, the first word in the list tends to impact how people perceive all of the words after it. The example that really stuck with me was that when you describe people as, quote, fun, witty, and vicious, they are perceived much more positively than if you describe those same people as vicious, fun, and witty. If you put vicious first, the negative interpretation is much stronger than if you put fun first. So these are word choices, but the type of grammar and the sentences we construct also impact this. Think about the difference between saying, "Could you please open the window?" and "I order you to open the window," and "Wow, it's really hot in here and I could use some air." Same potential end goal, three totally different ways to get to it, all of which reflect and create our relationship with the person we are talking to. Am I hoping they will guess what I want if I use this very indirect talk? Or is this the kind of person that I can order around like that? Feels really strange to say, "I order you to open the window." We do this every day, but we often don't notice the power that it gives us. And I'd like to point this awareness at our work and talk about how we can be courageous with this particular source of our power. So when we do our work in libraries or infrastructure, we are often carrying a picture of the world we want to see. When we're makers, we know the garment we're trying to knit or the tapestry we're trying to weave. And I've included this tapestry in my slide here, the elephant from the Valois tapestry, which is just a total spectacle in fiber art form. But if you don't have a vision of the world that you want yet, the world that you want to come out of the work that you are doing, honestly, that's a incredible first step in itself. Taking that time to picture the outcome that you actually want if you were not held down by the constraints of current reality. What would your ideal research and infrastructure world look like for your current work? What would be the successful outcome? For a lot of us, that picture includes things like people being able to use infrastructure without having their private data harvested, where researchers can publish in open access journals and share their data in our repositories, and they don't have to worry about paying thousands of dollars in fees, or where anybody can reach our collections for free wherever they are in the world and reuse them and learn from them. And, honestly, I was looking at the schedule for this event, and so many of the folks speaking here over these 2 days are doing this work. They're building platforms that are easier to use, making metadata curation simpler, being really thoughtful about where AI tools help and where they don't, They're harnessing community to make materials more accessible to everybody. Together, y'all and we all are creating this garment. And another aspect to consider in our work to make this future happen, besides our work on these projects, is the language that we use to talk about them. Because I've noticed so often the way that we speak about the work that we do or the projects that we work on or the tools that we support, we often undermine ourselves through powerless language moves. Recall our examples from before that the very words you choose to use in simple interactions can have a huge impact, not only on the meaning of what you say, but the state of the world. Are we friends or coworkers? Has our tax status changed? Does this person hold power over me so they can order me around like that? I want to look at some examples specific to our world that I have experienced and written about, and I'll share my examples with you, but in the Q&A or in the chat, I'd love to hear your examples from what you're working on with Scholars Portal or your libraries or your consortial work, and use this as a jumping off spot. So, example number one, traditional publishing. I've heard this euphemism a lot, right? Traditional publishing. And when I hear that, I usually think, oh yeah, this means a journal that sells subscriptions for access or a monograph press that sells printed publication for a sometimes outrageously high price. And when a librarian or a colleague says traditional publishing, I know as a fellow colleague in this field that they mean subscription publishing or expensive monographs or basically anything but open access. But there's something about the choice of the word traditional in this euphemism. If you look up that word or you think about what other feelings or associations come up when you think about the word traditional, we start to reveal what might be the problem. To me, when I think about traditional, I think maybe old-fashioned, but also tried and true, status quo, safe, the thing that's always been done. And it turns out there's a phenomenon that gets triggered by words like traditional that has been studied for decades in behavioral psychology. And it's called the bias towards the status quo. Remember, we were talking earlier about how humans have this tendency to go with the status quo, what's familiar, what's currently in place. This is that bias. When people face a decision, they tend to favor whatever they know best or whatever has been described to them as traditional, standard, or conventional. They'll favor those things over anything described as new, alternative, experimental. And here's the part that really gets us. That status quo bias gets stronger the more cognitive load somebody is under. And this has been shown over and over again. And again, I mentioned those resources I'll link to at the end. I share a couple of studies on that, including one by my colleague, Melissa Cantrell, and myself. So here's an experience I bet we have all had that illustrates this phenomenon. You go to a new restaurant, and maybe it's a cuisine you've had before, but you're not totally familiar with all of the options. And suddenly you're in line and you're faced with a huge menu board with all kinds of different possibilities, including words that maybe you're not quite sure what they mean. And then you're at the front of the line or the waiter comes to your table and now there's a time crunch. You are under intense cognitive load with all these new words and ideas and decisions and possibilities. And now you must make a decision. And if you're like most people in these studies, or frankly, me, honestly, you probably choose something familiar. So if you spot something on this menu that, oh, I've had that before and I liked it well enough, that's what you'll go with under this intense cognitive load. You might be giving up an opportunity to try something new and potentially amazing, but that cognitive load plus that bias towards the status quo means that most people are far more likely to go with a safe option or one that's described as traditional, conventional, default. It's why many restaurants these days are putting stars or customer favorites or these kind of indicators on their menu. It's to activate that phenomenon. Now imagine this for one of your researchers that you work with. They have probably already made 10 hard decisions today about experiments, data, analysis techniques, or their class that they're teaching, or their employment contract. And if they are under any kind of pressure to get this article published so that it can count for their review or a job application or a grant proposal, now imagine they're submitting this paper to a so-called hybrid journal where they have both subscription option and an open access option. But the subscription option is like one click, and the open access option has licenses to pick, fees to pay, options to deposit in this repository or that one. That's like a lot of decisions. And what will they do? If they're like most people or me in that restaurant, they reach for the easiest, familiar, safest sounding, tried and true option just to get the decision over with. It might be what they did last time. It might be what their advisor suggested. It might be what they've learned works just fine. Or it might be what some librarian has called the traditional option. Every time we use a euphemism like this, like traditional publishing, we are activating that status quo bias. With this euphemism, we prime people to choose the exact model that we are trying to move away from and to feel very inconvenienced when they are mandated to do something different. That's my first example. I want to have another example here, which is going back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is how people talk about AI. Have you ever noticed people say things like, I asked ChatGPT, or the AI tool thinks this is the best option, or AI is coming for our jobs, or we're fighting the bots? Every one of those phrases and choices is setting a frame for how we think about those interactions. What is that frame? All of those examples tell us that AI is someone we can ask and consult, someone that can hallucinate a citation, or an enemy that we have to battle. This grants AI a mind that it does not have. And if AI is a thinking entity, then it might feel autonomous and maybe like an adversary. That framing is exhausting, especially for those of us sold on the promise that AI was supposed to make our lives better, and our lived experience tells us the exact opposite. And the second point is my sociolinguist point. With this kind of language, we personify AI with our language. And by doing that, what we are actually doing is hiding the actual humans. When we say ChatGPT said that this is the best option, first of all, ChatGPT can't say anything, but it erases that somebody made an ask to the AI bot, and that somebody is responsible for what they do with the information that comes back. A sentence like, the bots took down our repository, erases the company that built those bots and the people that chose to point them at you. And now, even worse, some search engine companies are using entirely AI generated responses, not indicating sometimes where sources are even from, and obscuring the fact that by searching for something in a search engine, the person entering the term was conducting an AI query that maybe they did not even want to do in the first place. This is a linguistic phenomenon, and it's been studied for quite a long time, and it's called obscuring the agent. The agent is a linguistic term for an entity that does or commits an action. And this might be familiar if you ever got corrected by a grammar teacher for using the passive voice, because it obscures the agent. And as a linguist who studied this for years, it makes me grind my teeth a little when I see a news report, for example, that says a person was attacked. Instead of naming who did the attack, they are fronting the victim in the sentence, but not the actual agent who did the attacking and should be held responsible. And now we're using that term agent for certain kinds of AI bots. But the linguistic agent is the person, the one doing the search or the query. There's a person sending the bot out to do their bidding, and we're obscuring that agent with some of this language. And instead, we put at the front the tool or the instrument being used to do the action. It's like saying a stand mixer made the cookies. The stand mixer might have been the tool to use to make the cookies, but a person did it. What does this do to our message? So again, this reflecting on some research that Melissa Cantrell and I did and wrote about back in 2021 in the Journal of Librarianship and Scholarly Communication. We discovered this term that's really useful. When your own language that you are using endorses the very thing you are working against or trying to advocate against, that's called a patchy endorsement. And this term was coined by, I believe, Neil Levy in 2014. So calling subscription publishing traditional activates that status quo bias, and it's a patchy endorsement. And talking about AI as a thinking being that acts on its own when what you actually want is for people to use it as a tool carefully on purpose to relieve us of menial labor, not to go back to my laundry still needing to be folded. Um, that's all a patchy endorsement too. And the intervention is small. It's within our power. We can mend the language. We can make a small change. So I changed the way I talk. And instead of traditional publishing, I say subscription publishing when I'm talking about a journal. It means exactly what the model is, a journal that you pay a subscription to read without implying anything about norms or defaults or safe choices. So we don't tear out the whole sweater. We don't start over. We just make a little change. We unpicked a cuff and fixed the sleeve length. We took out the problem word and inserted a new word. It's not exactly easy, but it makes a big difference in the final product. And with AI, it's a frame shift. It's that same thing I did when I changed it from being fearless knitting to being courageous knitting. We can intentionally and deliberately frame AI as an instrument, both semantically and ideology, like a crochet hook I can use to rescue that dropped stitch in my knitting. An instrument is something a skilled person picks up on purpose to do something. A tool cannot be your colleague. Companies selling those tools, there might be your colleagues. A tool can't be your enemy or take your job, but that same company selling those tools might be trying to do just that. Librarians have been dealing with this for a long time. We know what to do. We center the humans. We make it about people using tools and books and community and relationships. We use our language strategically to center that. So some examples with the AI language, instead of Chat GPT wrote this, try something like, I used Chat GPT to help me write this. Instead of Claude showed this to me, you can say, I discovered this source after querying Claude.ai. Now, this gets extra complicated if you have a very smart actual human friend named Claude. And this is another strategy that these companies used is naming their tools after people. So I often, you heard me do it just now. I often make sure to add the .ai, Claude.ai part to give it an obviously tool sounding name instead of a human sounding name. And my favorite one in this set is we often say the AI tools hallucinated when they come up with something that doesn't make any sense or isn't true. We hear this with like it hallucinated citations. But people hallucinate, right? Not tools. Like a hammer can't hallucinate. So if you're using tool language, you can say something like, well, the tool produced a fabricated citation, right? And name the agent. The Anthropic's AI tool produced a fabricated citation. Or this company's bots are overloading our servers, not AI is attacking us. And this little shift of this tool-like language, like where we instead put the humans in front, it can result in an interesting shift in our frame of mind. I recently was in a meeting where somebody, instead of saying like, AI is getting stuff from our repository, they said somebody is querying an AI tool about material in our repository. And that somebody there tells a different story about the different kind of bots that might be using our materials. Those are just my two examples for you. There are lots more in this space, but I want to make sure, and I'm trying to adhere to time, I want to be really clear about one thing, that this is not magic. and this is not mind control. No single word is going to fix scholarly publishing, but instead, if we intentionally use our language this way, we can call attention directly to a problem or a solution instead of trying to hide behind a euphemism. So calling AI a tool is not the same thing as calling it harmless. But if we front the people using the tools, we put responsibility back on the people and the company using it. And this is a very human-sized decision. It's something you can try out and try different forms of it and see what works for you. This is a tool, a skill that you can learn as part of your making, as part of your job, and practice and refine to mend what is wrong in the world that you see. So here's my challenge to you. So we make with our hands, let's extend it to making with our words. My challenge to you is to start talking and writing about the work that you do as if the world you want to see is already here. It's a very human action to use language to our benefit in this way, to call into existence the world that you want to see. And I have to say, this isn't a novel idea. I know we must have some PWHL fans in this audience where these shirts that say, everyone watches women's sports have gained popularity. I love this personally. This phrase on the shirt calls into existence a world that the wearer wants to see. And maybe somebody reading it feels a little bit of that FOMO, fear of missing out. And just like we can change a relationship by calling someone a friend instead of a coworker, we can call the world we want to be into being. Say subscription publishing. Say AI is a tool, not a colleague, not a war. I would love to hear about your patchy endorsements. What are the words in your writing that are maybe unintentionally endorsing the very thing you are working against? What are some alternate ways you could phrase it? What could this look like in your world? Is it everyone uses Scholars Portal? Everyone puts their data in a repository? Everybody's ready for that tri-agency open access policy. Or what do you mean? You still publish in subscription journals? And importantly, while this is not magic, it is a skill you learn in practice. And once you shift the way you talk about the world into calling into existence the world that you want to see, you can see the places where the current reality mismatches. You can be courageous and access that human act of mending because you start to see where you might be in that maker chain. Just like a company making knitting needles might offer different needle sizes for projects because they know knitters make all kinds of things, you might start to change what you offer because you can envision a world in which your tool is used for outcomes you want to see. It's not just making with our hands, it's making with our world, our speaking with our words, also making with our world. But okay. And if we shift that to the infrastructure that powers our work, our research, and our lives, we can maybe see some shifts. Is it changing an AI tool option in our infrastructure services from opt out, opt in, changing that default so the status quo is different? Is it defaulting to not collecting user analytics beyond what we know we truly need? Is it making that the default rather than just over harvesting people's data in case? Is it choosing a less perfect solution and highlighting that it's more aligned with our ethics when we talk about it? Or is it in doing something like investing our labor locally with people who know our system and practices rather than outsourcing everything to save a few dollars while weakening the maker chain that we're all part of? So today we've looked at two very human behaviors, making and using language, and I hope that you're starting to see the power that you have in both. If we think of language as another way that we create, we see another way for us to participate in that maker chain. Sometimes you can just change a single piece, one word, one phrase, and our infrastructure, one setting, one component, one preference, and the shape of the whole thing changes. By doing these truly human acts of language and of making, we exert our agency. By knowing the world that we want to bring into being and knowing our own place in that work, it helps, at least helps me connect to purpose and meaning and see how I can affect real change in small everyday acts. Because you never know who's going to be listening to you describe a publishing option and what kind of impact that might have on them. These human acts are the common thread. They run through every one of us in this room and through every piece of the world and the work that we make together. It's really fitting that right after we have a question and a discussion here, we have a crafting corner coming up next, and we get to do some acts of making together. And whether you pick up a knitting or sewing needles, a crochet hook, a chisel, a paintbrush, or I don't know, your coding language of choice, I cannot wait to see what you are making. Thank you very much. Here's my contact information, my references.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I don't know if you can see this. I think sometimes when you share your screen, you can't see the like live reactions coming in, but there are tons of hearts and applause coming up right now. Very well deserved. That was such a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. So much to think about. I'm glad we have the Craft Corner scheduled right after this too, because I imagine there might be some carryover of conversations there, especially with all of the really, really well aligned like crafting analogies and ways we can think about this. Definitely thinking about Scholars Portal merch now. We should get everyone uses Scholars Portal on a t-shirt. We had a merch request last year, so maybe this is the time. I'll give a few minutes for folks to put any questions that they have in the Q&A. A reminder, please put them in the Q&A rather than in the chat. I see Sabina is already on it for that. Thank you. And then we can take some questions. We have about 15 minutes for questions there. Thank you, Tim, for saying you'd wear the t-shirt. I think the merch request last year actually came from you, so it's good to know that you're still on board with that. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I just want to say I really appreciate the emphasis on communication, which I know obviously is your area and with linguistics, but I think the importance of how we talk about our work and our tools and very small but significant changes like traditional publishing to subscription publishing, and thinking about the impact of that and how can we do that in other areas of our work of where is there maybe even like a misrepresentation of like, well, what do we mean by traditional publishing? It's not very descriptive of the practice. Like if someone was new to scholarly publishing, to academic research, traditional publishing, like what does that mean? What most people understand of publishing is probably more like the book publishing industry outside academia. So it's not even necessarily descriptive of what it is and what it entails. So sometimes even just in being much more descriptive and accurate and trying to really represent what something is and how it works and the goal of that service or project is also sort of solving an issue of agency, of authority, of power, and all of that
Gabby,
is
if I
really,
could
really
share,
important. Please do.
while
Yes.
folks are getting their questions, there's another example I wanted to include in this keynote, but I didn't. But
Yeah.
your comment brings it
You've
up
got
for
time.
me.
Go for it.
Yes, I love this. There's so when I started working in scholarly communication, there was only open access.
Hmm.
But in the intervening years, there's like green open access, there's gold open access, there's diamond open and bronze and
We got
like just
platinum somewhere
infinite
in there, maybe. Who knows?
metals and gems. And
Yeah.
I'm like, it's so confusing. And if you're new to this space and you see diamond open access, you're like, what even does that mean?
Hmm.
And this is one of those points that was so confusing. When I did this research with Melissa Cantrell, we actually looked at how people were using all of these terms and like nobody could agree on anything. And
Of
you can
course.
just imagine the cognitive load of somebody trying to figure out what the heck this is. Instead, we just suggested, use actual words like, APC paid open access in a journal, uh, open access in a repository, no fee open access publishing, right? Like things
Hmm.
like actually describe it instead of
Hmm.
using these euphemisms that nobody really understands or can
Yeah.
agree on. That's one
Yeah.
of those ones that I've tried to use. I mean, when we're among our colleagues who all share this jargon, great. I mean, talk however you want with your colleagues in the jargon. But when you're talking to like new audiences or creating materials for a website, oh my goodness, there's a different approach there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think even just within other spheres of librarianship and research as well. I mean, one of my friends is a public librarian, and I was sort of telling her the other day about this keynote and about, our service Scholaris, and she was sort of like, "What? How does publishing work? What is Diamond?" And she's a librarian, but she's not working in academic libraries. She's not working in scholarly publishing, and So, but is still someone that is still a figure in the community of information and that someone might go to, especially if they're newer to an academic landscape to this publishing, right? And the distinctions between different types of librarianship, different types of knowledge in this area. Whereas if we change a bit how we talk about it, so it's a little bit less jargon heavy, fewer barriers, that's can have a really big impact that way. I do see a
Very,
question in
Yay,
in the
question.
Q&A for you. So, Charlotte has asked, so there's a medical doctor on the CBC morning show who once a week does a short bit and always ends with the what the t-shirt would be. It's sort of the new elevator pitch, elevator speech. So what tips do you have to try and narrow down what we often think of as really complicated concepts to get down to the essence to that t-shirt?
That's a great
Great question.
question. And I think there's a couple of different tactics that you can use. One is think again about that ideal world that you want. What is the thing you're actually trying to get people to do? If you're trying to get them to share their stuff in Scholars Portal, um, you highlight that, Scholars Portal is a place where you can share your materials. It's a repository. You highlight what is useful for them and the thing is that you actually want them to do, right? When it comes to things like, diamond open access and these big things, um, I once you notice the euphemisms, I dare say you're going to start having a euphemism radar where you're
Yes.
like, that word that I am using, and like, there's no shade on anybody. Like, we all use jargon. Um, you start to just pay attention and use intentionality and say, okay, when I say diamond open access, that's fine if I'm talking to like my publishing colleagues, but like I often say, if I were brand new to this field, or if I were explaining this to my mom, who was not at all familiar with scholarly publishing at all, what's the like main idea I would want them to take away?
Hmm.
Um, and that is the way that you can get down. The other tactic that if it's really, really, really complicated and you really want to distill it down into its like core component, this is actually just really fun to do with anything, basically, but I often use this, what I call is a why chain. So it's like, I want you to publish in Diamond Open Access journals. Okay, why?
Mm,
Because it makes the research free to everybody. Okay, why? Because you don't have to pay a fee to publish or read any of that. Okay, why? Well, because other outlets make you pay a fee, and like you just keep saying why to yourself down until you get to that little part that, you get to a sort of distillation. And that's, I think, what a lot of people do to come up with those t-shirt slogans, like you're saying about that
hmm
person on
hmm
CBC.
Yeah, sometimes it's the sort of the 5-year-old stage of a toddler who's just like, why? And sometimes those are very, very important questions and will help you narrow it down. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Next one is there a way that you reconcile familiarity with the personified terms associated with AI versus introducing non-personified language when discussing AI in a layperson's terms?
Hmm. Uh, I think I might need more context to this question, which is about, you know, so if you're talking to like a layperson who is not like deep into the weeds of like data privacy and all these things, dealing with AI in everyday um, situations, I just start using the language that I want to use, and you'll see people do this thing naturally, which is called accommodation, which is where we change our language to suit the people we're talking to. And this is most often studied with like code switching, language switching, and dialects. But even just with terminology, like if you're talking to somebody and they're using a totally different word for something than you are, one person usually will switch to the other. And it's
Mhm.
just like, I am intentionally using this tool language. I queried Claude.ai about this topic, for example. If you start, I mean, you can use different language than that. That's just the one that I came to my head right now. But if you start just using that, you start just saying Claude.ai instead of Claude, for example, people will start to match you if you just stick to it, right? You don't have to accommodate to people using personified language. if you use that tool-centered language and the human-centered language, the framing AI as a tool and centering the humans is what I meant to say there. Um, People will pick up on it. And that's a way, again, you're part of a chain of people. Somebody else picks up on it, then it goes on. And you can just simply point it out in conversation too. I actually had a really interesting conversation with my partner, who is a research and development chemist, who is saying that his boss always says like, well, Chat GPT said this and Chat GPT said that. And he just started pushing back and saying like, are you just like having casual coffee conversations with Chat GPT, or are you using it as a tool? So just, don't be afraid. Be a little courageous. Push back a little bit.
The fearless knitting again, even coming
Again,
out in sort
again,
of in how we talk too, not just in how we sort of act and make changes to like the service, the technical elements too, but even just how we talk about it with each other. Okay, I think we have time for one last question, which is great because we have one more in the Q&A. I see how the status quo bias functions in your example about scholarly publishing, but it seems to function completely differently in people's attitudes towards traditional media, and in brackets, biased, can't be trusted, irrelevant, versus the new and exciting new AI tools that have been immediately adopted. Sort of, hooray, Google AI summaries. I'll just believe everything they say. What can explain that disparity, or why the status quo bias doesn't work the same way in those kinds of instances?
yeah, that's a great question. And this is again about that framing. So, um, the status quo bias is like a human behavioral tendency, but it doesn't always hold. And when you frame, for example, if you are at a company that frames itself as like a disruptor and innovative, and we're ones who always do the new and whatever techie thing, whatever language that they use, then
Hmm.
that becomes the status quo. If you reframe the status quo to being on the cutting edge, trying all the new stuff, if that's the status quo, then you're gonna like move towards the status quo, which is like try all the new things, right? The status quo doesn't have to be like the old, like tried and true thing. That's the power of language, is that we reframe what is the status quo, and
Hmm.
then that becomes sort of the default. You can, instead of status quo, you can think of it as the default. So if
Mm.
people don't have access to like newspapers. You see traditional media. Like if people don't have access to newspapers, which is increasingly becoming a problem in the United States, or if if there's a concerted effort to reframe like a news outlet or television station as problematic, as doing these things like in the US, we like a lot of the traditional so-called traditional media outlets are often framed as like having a liberal bias or whatever. If there's like this concerted effort, then that becomes like a status quo, right? Like the idea that, the, newspapers and television news outlets are liberal is like taken as, you move the window and that's taken as the fact. So what there's a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me about media bias, who talk about this. But in our work, the idea of reframing the default, reframing the status quo to being publishing open access or sharing your materials in a repository is something that we can do with our language this way. And if we can try to make that more the status quo or the default or the accepted way of acting, the goal is to move people towards that instead of anchoring ourselves in the system that we just think is outdated and doesn't work for us anymore.
For sure. And that's also, where again that everyone watches women's sports shirt comes into play of being like, if you don't, you're sort of like, oh, I guess everyone does. I guess I probably should be, which you should be. So
Even if you know, like objectively, like that is not true because everyone includes every human, and I know people
yes.
who don't watch women's sports, you still have this moment of like, wait, really?
Yeah.
And like it still like starts to move that window and call it into question
Hmm.
for you and calls into question a world where everybody does.
Hmm.
And maybe it activates an interest in being part
Hmm.
of that. So
Even
let's
if it just
harness that
prompts
for our
that
good.
why chain that you mentioned,
Mhm.
right? If someone's resistant to the idea, but they see the message, then it prompts the why chain. Maybe then they're thinking about it a bit more. It can kind of help to shift some of that. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, it's just my I urge everybody listening here to just pay attention, be intentional about these things. And, you know, it's again, it's not magic, but it's a small intervention that we can all do, and it has a bigger impact than we can ever know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Um, that's all the time we have for questions. But I mean, if anyone has any others, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We're going to take a little break now and we're going to have our craft corner. But before we do that, if everyone could give a big round of applause to Lauren, please, for that absolutely fantastic talk. Um, Lauren, if you would like to stay around for the craft corner or any of the rest of the programming today, you're very much welcome to. But we won't keep you longer than than you need to stay. I'm sure you have many other things on your to-do list as we all do. So, oh, comment in the chat. Best keynote I've listened to in a really long time. Kudos.
My
Fantastic.
goodness.
There's lots of comments like that in the chat right now. So have a look. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back at 2 o'clock. If you would like to join the crafting corner, I'm going to create a breakout room. It's going to be completely optional. So if you want to just take a break and go for a little walk, stretch your legs, get some water, whatever, you can just stay right here, do that, and then we'll start again at 2. If you have a project with you that you would like to chat with people about, if you're interested in getting into crafting, have some questions, if you want to just socialize, I'm going to create a breakout room. It's going to be called Craft Corner, and you can join that breakout room and chat with colleagues. I think Sabina's going to hop in there. She's got her crochet with her, I think, and so she's got some some conversations to continue. But I will set that up now, and once that's ready, I will let you know. I'm going to create one breakout room. I'm going to let participants choose. I'm going to name it Craft Corner. Thank you for witnessing this in real time with me. Okay, the room is open. You can choose to join it if you would like. You do not have to. If you do not currently see the breakout room panel or didn't get a pop-up, bottom right corner of your Zoom bar, once again, that three dots more option, you should see a little breakout room option. If you click that, it should allow you to see the options and to join that room. So go ahead if you would like to do that. I'll stay in this main room in case anyone has any questions. But you should be able to hop in there now. I see a few people in that craft corner session. If at first you're just seeing a drop-down menu, yeah, okay, people are hopping in there. Great. Okay, I'll put up a slide. We will be back at 2 o'clock. Thanks, everybody, and thank you again so much, Lauren.
Oh. I'm going to be the crafting corner.
Okay. Hopefully we've got everybody back from break now. We're going to move ahead with some lightning talks. So I'm actually going to pass it over now to Sarah Koish from York, who is going to be our moderator for this session. So I will pass it over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Charlotte, and hello, everyone, and welcome. And it's my pleasure to get to have the privilege of introducing our first lightning talk. The title is Collective Captioning and Team-Based Transcripts, Leveraging Community to Create Captions and Transcriptions. They are we'll have Sonia Penningarden from Toronto Metropolitan University, Michael Clark from the University of Waterloo, Mark Wheeler from Wilfrid Laurier University, and Eva Liu from Thompson Rivers University, giving us this lightning talk this afternoon. So thanks so much, and I'm going to turn it over to them, and then I'll introduce the second lightning talk after.
Thank you for having us. We are presenting our collective captioning and team-based transcript project, exploring how we leverage the accessibility community to ensure compliance. My name is Michael Clark from the University of Waterloo, and I will be providing some context for the project. Last summer, OCUL Accessibility hosted a 2-day symposium. Sessions were recorded and would be hosted on the OCUL YouTube page. We undertook a project to ensure that the captions and transcripts would meet AODA requirements. This project used emerging large language models combined with manual intervention by a group of engaged volunteers. For our caption project, we relied on the work done the year before by Annetta Kwok at New College Library at the University of Toronto. We are indebted to the work Annetta did, enabling us not to have to start from scratch. We also had access to the newly struck OCUL AI group and their Whisper AI product. By partnering with this group as an early trial case, we both stood to benefit, but them from gaining valuable data about the effectiveness of their model, and us by potentially offloading aspects of the work from the human volunteers to the model. We solicited interest from attendees of the symposium, ultimately working with 35 volunteers from across North America. The 4 of us each took on the role of coordinator, looking after our group's assigned materials. Each video was fed into Whisper AI and a timecode caption was produced. Each volunteer was assigned approximately 12 minutes of video, would confirm the caption file was correct, make any corrections needed, create a corresponding transcript, and then pass all those completed files to another volunteer who would double check to confirm accuracy. We used a Google Workplace to organize our project, and provided in that workplace were instructions, demos, a living FAQ document, and recordings of all sessions that we had. We had a folder for each group that contained all of the raw and edited files. And we had our master sheet, which broke down who was responsible for what by time codes on each video.
Hi, my name is Sonia Penningarden, and I'm a librarian at Toronto Metropolitan University, and I'm going to be speaking about some of the project successes. So the greatest success of this project was the collaboration that it fostered between library workers interested in accessibility, both within OCUL as well as nationally and internationally. Each volunteer brought their own unique experiences, perspectives, and knowledge to the project. We fostered collaboration by holding training sessions prior to the project beginning, as well as drop-in sessions during the summer in which volunteers could share questions, concerns, and tips for creating quality captions. Each group coordinator also compiled questions and observations about tricky or ambiguous captioning procedures, such as dealing with things like overlapping words, filler words, and slang, into a document that was visible to all volunteers. At the project conclusion, we also held a debriefing session, both to comment on the process as a group and to celebrate our achievement. The nature of this process meant that the great volume of work that needed to be completed was divided amongst many, but completed collaboratively. Another successful aspect of the project was our ability to explore and leverage existing technologies in order to successfully complete the work. Technologies such as the VTT validation software that we used, as well as Notepad++, were not an initial part of our training plan, but were discovered and used in order to solve problems of accuracy and efficiency that came up along the way. Finally, we received feedback from participants about how positive this experience was for them. The intention of the project was to divide up an overwhelming amount of captioning work into something more manageable. Happily, the outcome of this collaborative project was an ability to meet with library colleagues from far and wide, to learn from each other, and to discover and implement technologies, tools, and tips that enabled the creation of high-quality captions. Volunteers were provided with a letter of recognition from OCUL's executive director, which could be added to their annual report, dossier, or portfolios.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eva. I'm the Discovery Librarian from Thompson Rivers University, and I will be talking about some challenges we faced. When trying to come up with some ground rules, we quickly learned that there were not any clear and established guidelines or standards around creating captions. And so we found ourselves making decisions between the four of us and during the check-in meetings with our volunteers. There was a lot of discussion around practices such as verbatim captioning or captioning for understanding, and which approach would be the most beneficial and appropriate for our intended deaf and hard of hearing audience. In the end, we chose the verbatim captioning because it maximized accuracy and for equal access. There were also many spelling challenges, particularly when speakers used Indigenous languages or names that were unfamiliar to some volunteers. Volunteers also encountered difficulties when working with highly technical content outside of their areas of expertise. In addition, the volunteers were from both Canada and the United States, which led to discussions about Canadian versus American spelling conventions too. Our use of OCUL's Whisper AI was intended to speed up our process and work by generating captions for volunteers to review. And while it helped in some ways, it also created new challenges. Many reviewers had to redo passages of captions because the AI had captioned it wrong or written it in other languages like in Chinese, Japanese, Cyrillic, or just random characters being mashed together. Near the end of the project, the four of us were responsible for uploading the files. However, we encountered time formatting issues that we did not expect. All of the timestamps created by OCUL's Whisper AI were inaccurate. As a result, we had to manually review each section and fix the format and spacing ourselves for all of the video clips of the 3-day symposium. This pushed our original summer completion timeline back by an additional 2 months into the fall. Overall, to create useful end results, we recognize that there are no shortcuts in accessibility work. A final challenge was ensuring that captions and transcriptions were genuinely helpful for our end user communities. This required ongoing human review, collaboration, patience, and sustained support for the people involved in the process, which is a challenge in its own right, but also what made the project memorable and meaningful. By actively problem solving, evaluating, critiquing, and revising AI-generated work, we are reminded of our own capabilities and the importance of community in problem solving work with emerging technologies.
So what are some key lessons? First, we can recognize a project as a distributed library service, kind of like interlibrary loan, where resource sharing work is managed across multiple libraries to expand access to collections for users. Likewise, for us, caption and transcript remediation work was managed across a large group of people to expand access to recordings for users. There are other examples of distributed work. In Project Gutenberg, distributed proofreaders create HTML versions of public domain books, and from the page allows distributed proofreaders to correct OCR archival material. Second, an infrastructure is needed to position humans to recognize errors. While large language models and machine learning may suffice when there's tolerance for errors or a corpus of materials to train on, academic knowledge disdains errors and pushes linguistic boundaries. Skilled and responsible humans are needed for verification. This infrastructure could include standards that define properly built captions and transcripts, training material for people, caption editing software to support corrections, and a directory of subject matter experts for specialized terminology. Also, since the purpose is to ensure people with disabilities benefit from the recorded events, academic libraries also need to inform user communities when there are improvements. Lastly, we think OCUL members would benefit if OCUL leadership recognized and supported grassroots initiatives like these. Practically, perhaps OCUL could develop an accessibility innovation fund to support members responding to difficult accessibility problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonia, Michael, Mark, and Eva. I know that all the members of all the presenters are here today, but just because of time, I'm going to suggest that we move on to our next lightning talk. And if there's time for questions after that, that we can pose them then, or we can pose them in the Q&A, and perhaps they can be answered by the presenters. So our next lightning talk we have is from Grace Liu from the University of Windsor, and her talk is titled From Journal Policies to Shared Infrastructure, AI Governance in Open Access Publishing. Thanks, Grace. Grace, I think you might be muted right now.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, sorry for the muting problem. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I added another subtitle, Advancing Collaborative Frameworks for AI and Publishing Governance, to better reflect the focus of this talk today. I'd like to start with the broader context and what we are seeing in AI use in research community. According to this year's Wireless Explanations report, in 2025, 84% of researchers using AI in some aspect of their work, and 62% using AI in research and publishing tasks. Both went up significantly from 2024, and most researchers plan to use AI in manuscript writing. However, guidance hasn't kept up. When we look at journals, the gap becomes very clear. In a study on AI policies in this journal, we found that near 70% of journals include AI-related statements, but only about 14% of open access journals have formal policies, and most of these are issued at publisher level rather than by individual journals. In response, at Windsor, we worked with an editor to develop AI guidelines for our open access journals to provide more consistent guidance and support. We have made good progress. We launched the guidelines last October, expanded to additional journals, and the policies are already evolving. However, this also reveals a key challenge. Keeping policies up to date is difficult because AI is evolving so quickly, and it's hard to re-engage editors in regular policy review. This work also relies heavily on individual capacity. At my library, I support journal publishing while also balancing multiple responsibilities. Editors facing similar constraints. Most are focused on daily operations, so ongoing engagement with the policies depends on their availability and buy-in. At the same time, demand is growing beyond a single institution. So while local efforts are valuable, they are difficult to sustain and even more difficult to scale. We also quickly realized this isn't just about AI policies. It spans the entire journal lifecycle. For new journals, there's often no baseline, so editors build policies from scratch using scattered examples. I supported this work and try to develop consistent documentation, but it's hard for a single institution to build and maintain it over time. For established journals, the need doesn't go away. Editors still seeking policy support, and the gaps remain, especially around the reviewer guidance and training. With turnover and infrequent publication, ongoing training becomes essential. Ultimately, policy support is continuous, not a one-time task. So the issue isn't just what policies we need, it's how we support them. These challenges are not just local, they are structural. While local efforts are valuable, they are not designed to scale. This points to the need for more coordinated, collaborative approaches. If we look at how commercial publishers are approaching this, we see a different model. They are already taking lead in this space. First, through research and industry dialogue. Second, they are embedding policies directly into their platforms. From my own recent experience publishing a work on AI chatbots for reference services with Elsewhere. AI disclosure requirements and other policies were presented consistently across journals on the same platform. This aligns with the findings from our list journal research in 2024, which shows that AI policies are largely publisher-driven rather than journal-specific. Third, publishers are developing more structured governance approaches. For example, SAGE distinguishes between internal uses of AI and publishing uses, with guidelines tailored to each context. Overall, the key difference is that policies are enabled by infrastructure, not left to individual journals to manage. This raises a key question: what could this look like in our context? Scholars Portal has already built a strong foundation through shared infrastructure and long-standing support for journals. Over the past decade, this has significantly reduced the technical burden on local institutions like Windsor. The opportunity now is to extend this model to shared policies infrastructure, common frameworks for AI, privacy, and editorial guidance, along with coordinated updates and training support. With AI evolving quickly, the timing is right for Scholars Portal to help lead consistent, scalable governance for open access publishing. To conclude, policy and AI governance cannot be sustained journal by journal or institution by institution. It requires shared, coordinated infrastructure. This is really about building on what we really do well, moving from shared technology to shared governance, and from individual effort to collective support. Not just bad policies, but the infrastructure to sustain them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. And also thank you to our other presenters, Sonia, Michael, Mark, and Eva. We have about 1 minute left in this lightning round. If folks have a quick question that they'd like to pose, they can pose it in the chat or in the Q&A. In the meantime, I will just draw the attention to Sabina did post that to keep an eye out for folks to keep an eye out for the OCUL New Initiatives Fund proposals coming up over the summer, and there's a link there for folks. And Mark also outlined that it would be nice to have something that was specific to accessibility challenges as well. So a dedicated fund. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. If I don't see any questions, then I'll turn it over to our next round of lightning talks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I see there is a question in there, but we are at 2:20. So maybe if I believe this is for the first lightning talk. So team, if you wouldn't mind popping into the Q&A, you should be able to type your answer like as a comment in the Q&A. If you wouldn't mind addressing Amelia's question there, that would be lovely. Thank you. Seeing some thumbs up. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm now going to pass it over to Amber, if we have her here. Yeah, I see her there, to talk about Borealis. So you can go ahead and share your screen, Amber.
Gabby, do you mind sharing your screen? I'm just going to read my notes.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can just say next slide when you're ready for me. Give me 2 seconds to get those up.
Sounds good. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name's Amber Leahy. I'm the service director for Borealis and a librarian at Scholars Portal. It's so nice to be here and listen to all of your stories about community and collaboration and, stitching together this sort of common fabric. That's definitely the story I want to continue with our Borealis update today. Thanks, Gabby. Okay, so as I mentioned, I introduced myself. My name's Amber Leahy. This really is coming from the Borealis team as a whole. So I just want to give a shout out to the whole Borealis team here at Scholars Portal. So Zainab Chavik, who's our data support specialist for Borealis and Odyssey, Billy Hu, a data infrastructure librarian for Borealis and Scholars Portal, Alyssa Conlon, Elise Duard, and the Scholars Portal technical infrastructure and support team of developers and system staff, and our current students, including Ada Liu and Terry Latondra. Okay, next slide. So Borealis, if you're not familiar, it's a Scholars Portal hosted shared repository infrastructure for research data. Our infrastructure is largely hosted here at the University of Toronto Libraries in the data center and replicated across the Ontario Library Research Cloud. The system uses the open source Dataverse repository platform, which, if you're not familiar, is a large scale international open science, open source infrastructure collaboration. And so our instance, locally hosted here in Canada, supports over 80 institutional academic libraries across the country. And today, Borealis has over 13,000 users with over 24,000 datasets deposited and shared. So hosting the infrastructure is part of what we do. The other part of it is about building community and building capacity and fostering that knowledge sharing and collaboration. And so how the people fit into the infrastructure and the stories and the work that goes on behind the scenes is really what I want to share for you today about all of those collaborations and fostering of that open sharing. So how we do this is through monthly bilingual community calls that are hosted for Borealis institutional library administrators, librarians, and staff gather every month together with the Borealis team and members from the larger research data management ecosystem, including the representatives from the Digital Research Alliance of Canada and institutions across the country. It's facilitated by a team of both community nominated and Borealis team staff members who are listed there on the slide, including John Huck, who's the co-chair for the Borealis expert group, and he's based at the University of Alberta and supports that larger national community of administrators. Myself, and then members from the Alliance and Borealis team, and Carrie Breton from the University of Guelph. Every month we feature guest speakers. We have Borealis updates, platform updates, community updates. We've started doing, again, research roundups and making those a focus point and asking people to nominate and spotlight some research data from their local communities to share openly, as well as open discussion time. So we really try to build into this a community, an opportunity, and a platform for exploration, for feedback, and shared learning. So I'm going to share with you some what's new, what's coming, and what is the community working on highlights tour. Next slide. So this year, the community contributed a lot of different data sets to spotlight through the research roundup. So this May, we had a research roundup highlighting research from Brock University's, Glenn Tattersall and Danilo Giacometti from Brock University, who were supporting their published manuscripts and research with deposits of data about sub-zero body temperatures of blue-spotted salamanders in Algonquin Park. This research was spotlighted and highlighted on social media announcements, thanks to Gabby for her announcements on Blue Sky and Mastodon in collaboration with those researchers at Brock. So thanks again to the community facilitation team and Gabby for their support and ongoing coordination of these kinds of research data spotlight initiatives. We also hosted several community events this year. I'll just highlight this one in particular. In February, Love Data Week, thanks to Julie Shee, our digital preservation librarian at Scholars Portal, and the Borealis team and staff members for helping to coordinate a research data preservation panel, which was co-hosted by Scholars Portal, Borealis, and the Alliance Network of Experts, to bring together 7 panelists to describe what does digital preservation of research data look like across institutions and organizations, and to bring together and gather interested library staff, librarians, and researchers to understand and strengthen our community around digital preservation of research data and how to get started with doing that locally. So all of these recordings and slides were made available openly and bilingually in our Borealis Spot Docs wiki space. Next slide. In terms of the infrastructure upgrades, which there are many, We have upgraded Dataverse this past year from Dataverse 6.4 to Dataverse 6.8. And we've also been doing some upgrades to strengthen our underlying infrastructure, including upgrades to our databases, the versions of our systems, and to ensure the latest security patches are deployed. And this recent production upgrade was completed in May of this year. We're also developing a new metrics app for Borealis to enable metrics by collections in a dashboard. And this new dashboard will allow for incorporating Make Data Count, which is a new metric type that we're incorporating into our Borealis infrastructure and have been tracking for some time, but haven't released it in a tool or in the user interface yet. So Make Data Count is similar to Counter, but for data sets, and it includes views, downloads, and citation counts. So we're currently incorporating and building that into the new metrics app. This new metrics app will be fully updated and bilingual. The previous one was only available in English, so this adds that English and French application to the infrastructure. So that's coming soon. Next slide. This past year, the Borealis team also collaborated with the Scholars GeoPortal team. For those of you not familiar, Scholars Portal has also hosted for a long time a geospatial research data repository and map exploration tool to enable researchers to discover and access geospatial data. And so through collaborations with the GeoPortal team, including Alicia Arquidi-Diaz and Victoria Lubitsch, a developer on the GeoPortal migration and redevelopment project, we collaborated to develop an expansion to the open source Dataverse repository geospatial metadata block, adding 22 new fields based on the international ISO 19115 metadata standard to describe geospatial data. And this new set of fields is added to Dataverse's geospatial metadata block, which are enabled by researchers to add metadata to describe their data sets. And we will use this as part of the collections where the Scholars GeoPortal will be migrating into Borealis later this year to support metadata for that system and that search and discovery in that new platform. Previously, the GeoPortal had developed and maintained a separate geospatial metadata tool, custom homegrown application, which unfortunately has reached end of life. So this new metadata management, metadata editing, and creation will happen in Dataverse, and we're hoping that this this expansion will be reused by others using Dataverse globally. We hope to have this in Borealis release later this year. Next slide. To continue on the theme of today, changing our language, changing with how we think about it, we've definitely learned a lot about AI bots this year. So Borealis, like so many other repositories, has been dealing with increased high volumes of AI bot traffic, for lack of a better term. And we're really learning a lot about adoption and use of AI tools and AI bots in our uncoverings and research. So as part of tackling these problems, we have uncovered instability issues when we are faced with these high volumes. So we do temporarily block IPs. That has been a strategy by our systems team. And so at times we are targeted and we are blocking those specific IPs on an intermittent basis. And we are really trying to improve and standardize our processes around communicating, around how we document these IP blockages, how we redirect users when they are affected by these IP blockages. So there's so much that we're learning. And we're also looking into alternative solutions to manage the bot traffic at a systems level, including incorporating tools like Cloudflare or Anubis, and opening up the systems to more connections to increase the load and to help balance the systems. You'll hear more about this at tomorrow's talk by Scholars Portal about bot traffic and the Scholars Portal Journals platform. Stay tuned. Next slide. So rounding it out, surrounding all of this is also a very active Borealis expert group community and community of administrators using Borealis. So I just wanted to highlight a few initiatives that group is working on. So Borealis expert group, if you're not familiar, Formerly, this was called the Dataverse North. It's been a long-standing group that has spearheaded use of Dataverse in Canada. And so in 2025, it was formally established as the Borealis Expert Group, providing that function to the Borealis Steering Committee, which is a national governance group about Borealis advice. So that group also functions as a framework for working groups to coalesce and collaborate around shared goals and developments. For example, there is a group that has published a Dataverse metadata guide. It's on its third version now, and a fourth one is planned soon. There's also a group collaborating around common README templates and coming up with standardized templates for creating READMEs using Borealis Dataverse metadata, and there's a connected tool that's being developed to support that use in Dataverse. Currently, there's also a group looking into the local context integration, including, so local context, if you're not familiar, it's an international Indigenous-led organization that supports Indigenous rights and Indigenous ownership and control over Indigenous data and collections. And there are integrations with repositories such as Dataverse that we're hoping to leverage in Borealis in the future to support better attribution of Indigenous data, better rights and control management options in Dataverse and in Borealis in the years to come. There's also a new Borealis French terminology working group to help harmonize and support French terminology and translation efforts in Borealis. And my colleague Alyssa Conlon has been presenting a lot about this year, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback about how Borealis is a model for providing bilingual support and engaging with bilingual communities to support understanding and development and code maintenance. So there's so many things happening. I'll just highlight a couple more things. The collaborations with the Alliance Preservation Expert Group are longstanding and highly effective in ensuring that we're continuing to keep an eye to the future of all of this data, how to steward this data, how to preserve this data. Recently, we were part of this Borealis Core Trust Seal documentation suite where the Preservation Expert Group updated some templates to support institutions seeking Core Trust Seal certification of their repository collections. And this resource is a resource that can be used by any institution seeking Core Trust Seal around the world. The other collaborations that are ongoing and longstanding are with the Odyssey community. A few years ago, Odyssey migrated into Borealis, and we continue to explore workflows to support data curation. And you'll hear from my colleagues, Terry and Zainab, next to talk about ways that they're supporting and improving data curation with Data Explorer and the APIs in Borealis to support metadata curation in Odyssey. And we will be presenting at the upcoming Compute Ontario Summer School to talk more about Odyssey, Borealis, and the Scholars Geo portal. And I'll also just highlight that we continue to collaborate with other network of expert groups, including the Alliance Curation Expert Group. And recently, they've put together a series of workshops about Borealis and GitHub. So lots going on across the community. Next slide. I think that's my last slide. So thanks again.
Perfect timing.
There's lots of community resources to check out, lots happening in the Borealis community, and definitely would like to hear from you if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Amber. There's so much going on with Borealis all the time. It's been a really, really exciting year, and there's lots more to come. We are going to move on to our next lightning talk, but if anyone does have any Borealis questions, please drop them in the Q&A. And Amber, if you have a few minutes to stick around, and just in case there are any of those, and you could answer those by typing responses. So Borealis questions, into the Q&A. I'll echo Alyssa's little promo for tomorrow in the chat that at SP Des en Français tomorrow, we are going to hear from Alyssa and Elise to talk a little bit more about some of the work that French Terminology Group is doing. So if you speak French, you can join us for that. There'll be more info at the end. But now I'm going to move ahead. I'm going to introduce our lightning talk, which is weaving efficiency into library workflows, optimizing metadata curation in Odyssey and Borealis. I don't think Yan is able to join us today, so I'm going to pass it over to Terry and Zeynep to present. And I will stop sharing so that you can share your own slides.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, it'll be me presenting today. Let me just get my slides. 1 second. There you go. Everybody should be able to see the slides by now. So if you're able to just give a thumbs up or anything, or just let me know vocally.
Looks great.
Okay, looks great. Okay, perfect. So we've been up to a lot of things this year at Odyssey. So as entailed by the title of this discussion, we'll be talking about how we've been including efficiency in our existing workflows. So just to give a quick breakdown of what the market team is, we're a collective of individuals that work in different OCUL libraries. And what we do is that we help maintain the existing and upcoming Odyssey collection. This includes Statistics Canada surveys. We'll talk a little bit more about that on future slides. And so the market team, the students, which is largely made of students and their supervisors in each respective OCUL institution, facilitates access to the data. This can be by updating metadata. It can be by updating guides, anything that helps pass this information from Statistics Canada to the librarians and or patrons in the different institutions. We do this in large part thanks to a mandate that we have called the Data Liberation Initiative, which is a partnership between post-secondary institutions and Statistics Canada, where we are essentially the middleman, where we take the data and we make it accessible to students and or faculty members in other institutions, but it's also open to the public. And we do this in partnership with OCUL through Scholars Portal and, of course, Odyssey. Recently, we had the market assessment and we were able to establish some of the issues that we were facing with the program. For instance, we had heavily constrained resources, which it came to be an issue when we had to do maintenance on a large bulk of the collection. Having a collection doesn't simply mean throwing information in, it also means maintaining what we currently have, making sure that it stays up to date. We also have, by virtue of working mostly with students, have a high staff turnover. Students come in on a regular basis, often from master's programs in information, and then after 2 years, they'll be out of their way. And so we get a lot of loss in institutional knowledge. This is another issue we have to remedy. Another thing, we have a decentralized workflow. By virtue of working out of several different institutions, we also have different methods that pop up here and there, and that's just a side effect of having a decentralized workflow, which results in some metadata practices that are inconsistent between institutions. And therefore, this can sometimes lead to an unsustainable workflow and a fragmenting collection depending on who is handling what. Therefore, we needed to develop a scalable tool to facilitate the harmonization of metadata across all these institutions. And this came to the development of the Universal Field Editor. We needed a tool that was that allowed for metadata harmonization across different collections and different data sets. We also needed it to be easy to use for future students, for future supervisors, for lab managers, for anyone that is actually handling their own collection. We also needed it to support all metadata blocks, which also includes the GeoPortal future metadata blocks that are being developed. This is going to be an update later on. It also had to support, of course, terms of use edits, which was one of our main applications. We will see on the next slide as well. And it had to be usable in a bunch of different Dataverse instances. So it's not just Borealis. We wanted it to be generalizable for the community as a whole. And so we have applied this tool in a bunch of different contexts, one of which was during the rebasing of Statistics Canada files. So the labor force survey every few years gets rebased. So Statistics Canada updates the weights that are attributed to different variables. However, when we bring these new files inside of Odyssey, we can't just throw in the files. We also have to edit a lot of the metadata to reflect these changes that were done in the data sets. So for instance, I apologize for the French slide. This was the example CSV file that I had. We were able to edit a lot of the titles of the collections by doing so, or rather the data sets. Another case in which we use a tool was when we updated the terms of use. Usually we have templates that can be changed, and that change will be automatically applied to all data sets that use that same template. However, when we have 5,000 plus data sets, sometimes a few of them kind of, leak through the cracks, and we actually have to use different tools to do it because they weren't created off of a template. As such, we were able to use this tool to update the terms of use when we had a change from a queen to a king. And Statistics Canada follows a certain set of terms of use, and therefore we were able to use this tool to update that. And in terms of future use for this tool, we want to harmonize the sampling frequency that we have in our current data sets. All the red boxes represent a variation of annual. As you can see, there's a lot of different ones. And that simply comes from, a very long time of it's a cumulative issue that kind of piles up. Eventually, we have a lot of different terminology, but these issues can be remedied with simple collection curation by using advanced tools that can automate this process through CSV inputs, for instance. Of course, we're not just automating the current workflows. We're also grateful for all the students that partake in Odyssey, which put a great deal of effort toward continuously improving the collections that we have, also developing guides and ensuring that we, strive towards consistent metadata markup. And I do want to bring a spotlight on one of our students, Yane, which is from Queen's University, which has spent extensive time rejuvenating and creating specific guides for a bunch of different surveys, including from Statistics Canada series, as well as Environics Research Institute, which are held in their Cora collection on Borealis. We've accomplished a lot of things this year. Of course, I won't read off the slide, but we really punched above our weight. We were able to load new data sets, all the while creating tools to maintain the existing collection that we have. Again, we were able to rebase a bunch of labor force surveys. We're talking in the magnitudes of hundreds. That's a lot of work. It doesn't seem like it, but doing each and every single one of them through a user interface is very slow. So using tools and advanced scripts allow to do this quite rapidly, all things considered. And of course, we continue to strive towards an equal French-English service by ensuring that metadata is both loaded in French and English. And I want to thank, of course, all of our students that take part in this project. It requires a lot of effort, and I'm very grateful for the work that they do, both in French and English. And I'll be speaking to greater lengths about the French developments that we've done tomorrow in the French part of the conversation, specifically as it pertains to Odyssey. But thank you. I know that was quick, but I appreciate everyone that came and listened. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And yes, echoing your call of thank you so much to all of our students, to all the market students. You do so much work for this service and across all of our services. We're extremely lucky to have you. Thank you so much. And this year has been a really big year for a lot of kind of behind the scenes work on Odyssey, especially after a really big migration from a few years ago. There's still a lot of work going into this service to make it as useful for researchers as it can be. So thank you so much. If there are any questions for this presentation, we have about 1 minute before we're going to take a break, but we also again can have some questions in the Q&A and can answer them there. But I did also see lots of heart reactions and support for the Odyssey Market team. And thank you both so much. I know you guys work on this service really, really closely and put a lot of time and energy into this project and this service, and it really does show. I don't see anything in the Q&A just yet. So we'll maybe just take a few minutes if you guys have a few minutes to stick around and keep an eye on that Q&A in case any questions do pop in there for you guys. If you have a question, you've got a few minutes. We're going to take a break now. We're going to have our second break. We'll come back at 3 o'clock. I'm going to share my screen here again. So we're going to take a break. We'll be back at 3 o'clock, and that's when we'll resume our sort of main programming with the OCUL update. But we are going to have our first slideshow in a few minutes, and that's the slides of spring. So we'll take a few minutes break. We'll take about 7 minutes. But if you want to catch the slides of spring, be back in like 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll start that. If you want a little bit of a longer break, just be back by 3 o'clock for the OCUL update. So we will see you in a few minutes. Okay, springtime. Kind of summertime. I think it feels like 30 degrees or something outside here in Toronto, but we're going to ignore that and look at all these lovely photos of spring moving into summer from across the country. If this is your first Scholars Portal Days or your first Scholars Portal Days in a few years, this is sort of the newest addition accompaniment to the Pet Parade. Where we also have a Slides of Spring slideshow. It was thought of somewhat to be kind of a complement to sharing of land acknowledgements in trying to get people to share signs of spring around their neighborhood, flowers, trees coming into bloom, any sort of neighborhood nature-y sites that make them feel connected to their community, to their neighborhood, to the land they live on. And so here are some of what was shared this year. So we're starting out with a submission from Grace from the University of Windsor. These yellow tree peonies, which I've grown for a decade, link me to my hometown in China. They also connect me to my neighbors who were inspired to plant their own and share the beauty back. I love peonies personally. They're my favorite flower. So these are so, so gorgeous. This bush is really beautiful, especially with the really bright blue water and the dock in the background. This looks like a gorgeous, gorgeous sunny day with these flowers. Next one is submitted by Ellie from OCUL, a young moose standing in a field on my family farm near Aurelia, Ontario. Moose weren't common in our area when I was growing up, but now we've had a few moose visitors over the last 3 years. There's also an absolutely like gorgeous pink and purple sunset in the background here. If I was this moose, I would also be outside enjoying the sunset here. Ellie also told me after that she's been chased by moose before, but not this one. So this moose is good. We like this moose. This is submitted by Sabina at Scholars Portal. The lilac bush in bloom. My home with a tiny garden is just north of the Canadian Pacific train tracks and just south of Davenport Road. Get to Onegami, which has been used as a trail for over 10,000 years. And living in this neighborhood gives me a sense of being connected across the country and rooted in history. I chose this picture because I love the bright purple of the lilac. It's in full bloom. Next from Ryan from Wilfrid Laurier, we have part of the Laurel Trail through Waterloo Park near the Laurier Library. The path splits with pedestrians on the left and cyclists on the right. This is part of my commute home where I have some opportunity to experience some nature and interact with other. Oh, I think I missed a word on this slide. So sorry about that. That's my own fault for that. I'm actually from Waterloo myself, so I've spent quite a lot of time on this trail, and it's always really well used by walkers and cyclists alike. It's always really nice to see people out enjoying this trail in all kinds of weather, rain or shine, snow or sun, but especially in warmer seasons with the trees that line this walk and give a little bit of shade on a beautiful afternoon. This is from Annika at OCUL, who says, we know spring is here when the robins start building their nest on the light at the back door. The photos are of 3 chicks in the nest at feeding time. And here we have 2 photos actually of the robin nest. On the left and sort of at the bottom, you can see a full-grown robin at the nest with 2 tiny little baby birds poking their beaks up to say hello. And on the right, we have a shot up close of the 3 chicks, sort of peeking out of the nest. It's very, very cute. These photos are from Stefania at Scholars Portal and OCUL, and these pictures are from a local conservancy where I like to go on a walk and be surrounded by nature. The first picture here on the left is a picture of an Ontario bird, the red-winged blackbird, and the second picture is of the Credit River, which runs through Mississauga where I live. I'd love to see the beautiful sort of like sun sparkle on the water on the edge of the shoreline there. This photo is from Lynn at McMaster, who says spring is construction season. The photo shows Mills Library wrapped in red tarp surrounded by scaffolding with a cherry picker on site. We're replacing the aging and crumbling exterior brick facade and giving Mills a more modern look. It's a really, really vibrant red tarp. I don't think I've ever seen a construction tarp this vibrant, but this really resonates with me. I feel like living in Toronto is just like, yes, it's springtime, it's construction season. And we actually just had, at U of T, we had a little outdoor picnic yesterday surrounded by the construction. So spring is here indeed. This is from Sonia, and I love this description, a riot of tulips in my neighborhood, Sonia says. These are my favorite flower, and I appreciate the maximalism of my neighbor's front yard. This is also my favorite kind of garden. I really love a wild garden with lots of different brightly colored flowers and plants kind of growing every which way. So the ones in this picture here, we've got bright red, pink, yellow, orange, and even some little purple ones at the bottom that are not tulips, but I'm not a flower expert and I don't really know what those are. But if someone does, which I'm sure one of you does, please say in the chat what those purple ones are. This picture is from Mark at Laurier, and this picture is from a cluster of maple trees outside the Laurier Library on the Waterloo campus. Leaves on the trees are beginning to appear. A 40-foot mural, One Heart, One Mind, One Vision on the library faces the student center through the trees. And this mural is painted with a bunch of really, really vibrant colors, and it's sort of really caught in the sunlight. It's absolutely gorgeous. Some more flowers, another bright flower photo. This is from Amy at OCUL, a plethora of colorful tulips and daffodils in the bright green grass, seen on Mother's Day at the Toronto Botanical Gardens. So here we have, again, many, many colors, red, pink, yellow, orangey tulips, and a few clusters of the white daffodils, which, again, I'm sorry, I don't know my flowers very well, but if someone knows the technical name for those, please drop it in the chat. This is from Jacqueline at Scholars Portal, who says, for my money, crabapple blossoms are as magical as cherry trees. We have a lot of them near us, and they are quite hardy. Their petals last at least a couple of weeks. When the sky is blue, they especially pop, as seen in this photo here, but they're also welcome in gray, gloomy weather. And this photo is of a beautifully bright pink crabapple tree, sort of taken from across the street. It's in full bloom, and it really just brightens up the whole street corner, and looks like it provides some nice shade, too, on a sunny day, which is very important. This is from Krista at OCUL, who says, living in Sault Ste. Marie, one of the most exciting signs of spring is hearing the sounds of the MRN water bombers coming out to practice for the upcoming fire season. They circle the city for hours, but if you're really lucky, you get to see them pick up or drop off water in the St. Mary's River, with photo credits to John Stevens, former MNR employee. And we have two photos here of the planes. The top photo shows a plane flying low over the river, dropping off water, and it's really cool. It looks like a really intense, like fluffy cloud. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. And the second picture shows the plane in the river, which I presume is picking up water before taking off. This is from Jessica at Scholars Portal, who says each year, all of the baby birds are one of the first signs of spring. Around the bay in Hamilton, and these swan photos. The swan in the photo on the left is checking on her eggs while her mate is in the background pulling reeds to make the nest bigger. The second photo on the right is from 22 days later when some of these eggs have hatched, and you can actually see the four little baby swans, which are called cygnets, in the nest. Jessica also shared some fun facts about swans, so I will share those as well. One is that it takes 2 to 3 weeks to build the nest, and then they will incubate the eggs for 6 weeks. After hatching, the baby swans will stay with their parents for up to 6 months. The oldest recorded swan lived to be about 40 years old and spent their life on the lakes of Denmark, which sounds like a dream, to be honest. And swans mate for life. So who knows how many years these guys in the photo will usher in spring for us together, which is so lovely. So thank you for the swan facts, Jessica. Another stunner of a sunset from the OCUL team here. They're really winning on the sunset photos this year. Good job, team. This is from Alex at OCUL, who says, as many of you may know, I'm a big soccer guy, and spring brings soccer back to play outdoors. So this was a really nice sunset as the second half of a local high-level game began. And this sunset is like a really fiery red. There's some pink and orange in it too, with lots of wispy clouds in the sky above a soccer field, right mid-game. This is from Zainab at Scholars Portal and with the Borealis team, who says, my daily view from home in my neighborhood, Shepherd Young, is this pink magnolia tree. Watching it through all 4 seasons and observing its changes is amazing and a beautiful reminder of life, which is so true. These this is a gorgeous tree. And in the first photo on the left, you can see the flowers kind of up close. You're sort of peering through the branches at the pink blossoms against the bright blue sky. And then the second picture is from a little further away, kind of across the street, and you can see the tree in full bloom. And it's an enormous tree, and there are so many blossoms. It's very, very beautiful. And we'll end on a final tulip photo. And this is from Kendra at Carleton, who says, the tulips in the photo on the left, a bed of brightly colored tulips in front of a brick house at the Canadian Tulip Festival in Ottawa, which I now really want to go to. I'll have to check that out next year. I visit the Tulip Festival often as it is near Carleton University. The bright colors enliven the city, signaling spring is here to stay. And then the second photo on the right is of some blossoms. It's a tree covered in white blossoms surrounded by buildings made of brick and windows. As I walk around campus, I look for nature peeking out around the buildings. And this tree popped with white blossoms. And that's all of our slides of spring for this year. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted. I'm really glad that people seem to enjoy the spring slideshow. So I always love seeing what spring looks like across the country for everyone. And these are really gorgeous. So thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it over to Sabina now to introduce our next session, I think.
Thanks, Gabby. I love seeing these pictures too. I feel like every year we do this spring slideshow, we get better and better pictures from everyone. So thanks to everyone who contributed. All right, so our final session of the day is an OCUL update from Amy Greenberg, who is the Executive Director of OCUL. So Amy, I think you should be able to share your screen and put your slides up, and I'll pass it over to you.
Find out. The trick is not sharing the screen. The trick is making sure that the right slides show up on the screen. All right. I can't see what I'm sharing. All right.
I
Are
see
your
your
are you seeing my
PowerPoint
notes?
screen that includes your notes. Yes.
Yes, of course you are. Okay, 1 second. How's that?
There we go. Yeah, I see it
Okay.
now.
Yay. I promise I actually went to the rehearsal and did this, but it was just, anyway.
I'll vouch for her. She did.
Thank you, Gabby. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present to you at Scholars Portal Days 2026. It is a pleasure running with the theme. I present to you today a quick overview of the tapestry of collaboration, and I will give a quick shout out to Katrina Fortner in the OCUL office for very, very effectively and wonderfully pulling this theme together for the slides. So today, indeed, I will be guiding you through our tapestry and just what you can sort of expect from this presentation for the next 15 minutes or so. It's a bit of a retrospective snapshot of our recent OCUL activities and initiatives, but also highlighting some of the work that is either ongoing or anticipated for the coming year. So, how do we, think about our OCUL loom as the people and collaborations which enable strong weaving of our shared fabric? And you can think about the loom as having 4 components. We sort of think about these in these 4 groups in no particular order, and those groups are represented by those green rectangles with white writing on the slide. So one component of this is our council and our governance groups, where the council is essentially the board of directors for our consortium. And it consists of the 24 directors of our OCUL member libraries. We have 20 institutional members and 4 associated universities. And on the governance group side, we have over 20 governance groups. You'll hear me name some of them as the ones responsible for particular activities. These can include committees, subcommittees, working groups, and other kinds of and ad hoc groups. A second component of our loom are the member libraries, of course. As I said, we have 24 in total. And with our membership, it is really the staff at those libraries, librarians, library workers, who lead our who do things like lead our OCUL communities of practice or communities of interest. And of course, it is the staff at member libraries who contribute to our distributed workflows and our distributed library system, in particular Omni, which is what we call our shared implementation of Alma and Primo across 19 of our member libraries. A third and vital component, of course, of the Loom are our central staff, both in the OCUL office and on the Scholars Portal team. And fourth are our strategic partnerships, which help expand our provincial network and enable broader access to resources beyond just the OCUL, beyond just the OCUL membership. So carrying the metaphor further, if we think about warping the loom, which I have recently learned is, the warp are sort of those foundational threads, the foundational pieces of what you're weaving. So in this respect, this is really what we think about with our strategic priorities. So these give us the foundation to create our shared fabric. And in no particular order, those 4 strategic priorities are, I should say that these are relatively new strategic priorities. Last year, almost exactly a year ago, in the summer of 2025, we launched the first year of our new 4-year strategic plan. So we have just entered into year 2. And those priorities are fostering collaboration in collection management, leveraging technology for library innovation, cultivating member engagement and capacity, and strengthening governance, adaptability, and resilience. And for the next few slides, I am going to share examples of particular activities or projects in those areas, which, if I am correct in my loom metaphor, I believe we can think of as the weft that goes into the warp. And I see people adding comments, which I cannot see, but hopefully we'll get to them after. Okay, so the first priority that we'll talk about is collaboration in collection management, and we have many examples of this, many of which fall under the auspices of our OCUL Information Resources Committee, or OCUL IR. And so some examples that have centered in this group is our Consortial Evidence-Based Acquisitions, or EBA, initiative, and this has been going on since 2024. We have an EBA with Wiley that has resulted in 690 titles shared among the 19 participating schools. This working group is looking for upcoming renewals. They have surveyed members to gauge interest in additional books and have received proposals from 5 vendors and are now evaluating them. Also, under the auspices of OCUL IR, there was an open access working group that led to, in 2024, that led to the development of OA principles and an evaluation framework, both of which are available on the OCUL website. And looking ahead, folks at OCUL IR are going to use that framework to help facilitate recommendations for open access collections that could be added or loaded into our Scholars Portal journals or books platforms. Moving away a little bit from strict OCUL IR activities and thinking a bit more broadly when we think about consortial licensing. So we're really turning now to look at how to help support and manage that centralized work of managing consortially licensed collections. And to that end, we recently welcomed Nicole Morgan to the OCUL office team as our new Network Zone Collections Coordinator. And Nicole supports the management of consortially licensed collections in Omni, and is the work that she is doing now really builds on foundational past work of the Network Zone e-resource management working group that wrote a really productive report, and we are building on some of the recommendations that came in that report. As well, the Collective Collecting Colloquium, or CCC, because nobody wants to say those 3 words together as more than you need to. So last September, OCUL hosted the CCC. We welcomed over 70 participants from across nearly all of our member libraries. And this was an online event. It brought together collections experts, library leaders to discuss how OCUL could look to both prospective, retrospective strategies, activities that balance vision with pragmatic and incremental steps forward. And speaking of incremental steps forward, from that colloquium and from further consultations with the OCUL Council, there are next steps building on this work, and those next steps involve the formation of 2 working groups who will be scoping feasibility and resourcing for projects in 2 different areas. One is an Ontario shared print preservation network, or some kind of more retrospective retention, perhaps focused project. And the other one is more prospective, looking at our electronic collections and thinking about what we need to do to negotiate licensing and ensuring that the collections that we already license and already have access to are perhaps ready to be accessed by AI in a way that helps to support researchers and usage across our institutions. So as I said, these projects exist at a very high level right now. These working groups will be put together. They will determine over the summer and fall, they'll look at feasibility, risks, resources, build recommended roadmaps, and then bring all that to the next meeting of our council, which will happen in the fall. Okay, moving on to the second priority, leveraging technology for library innovation. Lots of ongoing work here. A lot of what happens, of course, especially on the Scholars Portal side and on the Omni side falls into this category. But essentially, a lot of the work that's happening now with Omni is looking to the future and the implementation of a new user interface in 2027 and helping to really build local capacity and using the existing groups that we have to work together to test the new interface, build communication templates and other communication resources, and just do what we continue to do and share knowledge across our libraries. We're also currently exploring how to leverage accessibility-related MARC fields and other metadata for resources in the network zone, which is the shared aspect of Omni and the catalog, and provide guidance to member libraries on how to display this information. We are also looking at how to provide and develop more robust analytics to support usage reporting across the consortium, particularly as it relates to interlibrary loan that happens via our automated fulfillment network in our system, and how to automate that a bit more. And so we've seen some really great collaboration between the OCUL office, Scholars Portal, and member library staff to develop these kinds of analytics and other sort of automation tools. And the last point there about a licensing information strategy. So this is an intersection of work that's happening with Nicole, the OCUL Collaborative Futures groups, and the OCUL IR groups to explore the best way to make not only the collections, but also the licensing information and usage information easily available for our member library staff, and how to integrate this or allow for data exchange among the various systems we currently have where this information lives. And yes, I am going to talk about AI a little bit. Those of you who have followed the work of OCUL and Scholars Portal, or who are part of OCUL, you know that we continue to explore responsible and ethical AI and machine learning in the academic library environment. We are now 2 years into our AI ML initiative, and we have one more to go. And this initiative consists of the 4 projects listed on the screen there. An audio to text project that explored the use of the Whisper AI model, for audio file transcription. This project just wrapped up in February 2026. We also have the government documents project with AI supported metadata generation. And interestingly, both of these projects found was that AI, of course, was very helpful in generating both transcripts and, in the case of GovDocs, the metadata, but there was still human quality assurance that was required, a bit more so with the metadata, I would say, than with Whisper. But those were sort of sort of summarizing and generalizing the findings of those. The remaining 2 projects are still continuing. The enhanced virtual reference project continues and is just now moving into the testing phase for a potential chatbot that integrates into our current platform, which is called Library Help, and our existing service, virtual chat reference service. And lastly, the ACE remediation project, which is the latest project to have gotten started. And the phase we're at now there is in refining how we handle marginalia in books to be scanned, and looking at evaluation rubrics for different kinds of AI-assisted OCR using a test corpus of books that are currently on our platform. All right, as you probably have gathered, governance groups, our committees and subcommittees and working groups are really fundamental to how OCUL does its work. They help align our consortial work and prioritize what's important to our member libraries. And given this, we have over 80 different roles across all of our governance groups. And I think as one, this is really what sets OCUL apart. One member library staff worker shared with us as part of our recent strategic plan development, and I quote, "The willingness to do things collectively is intrinsic to OCUL. We think OCULly, not locally, and this collaborative mindset drives our success." So some recent examples of ways that we are striving to cultivate, our members' engagement and capacity. We have a Truth and Reconciliation Committee that has hosted a speaker series to advance understanding of these efforts in the academic community. As well, for over 6 years, we have hosted and still continue to host online drop-ins for our member libraries to learn from each other about everything related to Omni, whether that is, system configuration, policies, or feature releases from the vendor, from Ex Libris. Coming up soon, we also have this year's Collaborative Futures mini conference, July 7th. This is a half-day event that showcases our members' best practices and key learnings. And anyone from Ontario universities or colleges, or if you're using Alma and Primo, you are welcome to join. The registration link is on the OCUL website. And as well, related to Omni, we are currently developing a new online documentation hub. The idea is that this hub will be open to the public, and we'll share as much documentation as we can provide on the use and features of Alma and Primo in a consortial environment beyond OCUL members. And this is really just giving back to the consortial library community. We have gained a lot from being able to see others' documentation, and we want to be able to share ours in the same way. I mentioned earlier that we also have OCUL communities. These are member-driven. They offer spaces for sharing experiences, problem solving, and building knowledge collaboratively. We currently have 18. We currently have 11 communities, with the two newest ones being acquisitions and e-resource management and resource description. And as well, on the AI side, one very important component of our initiative is the capacity building program. What we hope to do, and what we have done, we think, with the program, or at least have started to do, is to unpack ethical concerns introduced by AI, to ground its use in lived library contexts and shared values, and reduce both the hype and the fear around these emerging technologies. And this programming, like our future documentation hub, is open to anyone anyone working in academic libraries. We have 3 capacity building streams, a reading club that we call Beyond the Algorithm. This is bi-monthly. It curates a scholarly article, a recorded interview with an expert in that area, and offers live online community discussions. Secondly, we have the AI Tools for Academic Libraries blog series. This is hosted on LibTech Insights. It's a partnership between OCUL and Choice, which is the publishing unit of the ACRL, Association of College and Research Libraries. And the newest feature in our capacity building program is the AI Exchange, which showcases real-world applications at our member libraries. And this could be different types of training or tools via live online exchange sessions. And we've had really high engagement with all of these areas of our program, and we hope to continue to do so. Okay, last but not least, our 4th warp, strategic priority, strengthening governance, adaptability, and resilience, always very important. And some recent activities related to this area include, so I mentioned that our annual strategic plan is relatively new. And so with that, we have a new process for coordinating our annual work planning and reporting. We really are trying to promote collaboration among all our committees and subcommittees, share expertise, and also, make sure that each group feels that their work is connected to our strategic plan and anticipated outcomes. It also serves the purpose of providing council with a nice holistic view of all the work that's happening, and help support informed decision-making. Back to our OCUL IR committee, we have a licensing and local load subcommittee, which is updating the OCUL model license agreement. the sort of updates there are around language around privacy concerns, and that group is also looking at preferred language for AI usage terms in licenses. This group, the OCUL IR group, is also compiling guidelines from across our member institutions regarding our legal requirements under Bill 194 to conduct privacy impact assessments, or PIAs. And this framework that the group will eventually develop is intended to provide overarching broad direction on how to address individual requirements. But considering that we have a lot of consortial licensing, or that even when there is individual licensing, it's for products that are very similar across our schools, we're trying to figure out the best way to, again, leverage our collaboration to reduce the amount of local individual work that's needed there. And also under the auspices of OCUL IR, their collection, assessment, and evaluation subcommittee is at the preliminary stages of building a framework to evaluate AI that's part of vendor-provided electronic resources. On the Collaborative Futures and Omni side, we have the Strategic Projects Subcommittee, which is identifying, really taking a deep look at how our member libraries can best leverage our infrastructure. And they're doing this through reviewing our current practices and also conducting an environmental scan of other consortia. And on the metadata side, the Metadata Management and Standards Subcommittee, together with our Decolonizing Descriptions Implementation Working Group, are looking at a framework to describe a clear process for how to identify and make decisions on the best way to implement reparative descriptions in our shared network zone. So as we continue to weave our shared fabric and looking ahead, together we really we strive to create that tapestry of collaborative library services and systems and contribute to the success of our campus communities across Ontario, because that's what it's all about. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to stop sharing and hope that I am not too much over time.
Thanks, Amy. That is, as always, there's so much going on at OCUL. So much happening between Collaborative Futures and all of the AI projects. Little plug that the next AI exchange session is next week. I think next Wednesday, I want to say. So
right.
More events in the OCUL world. I don't think we have time for questions. June 10 and 11. Thanks, Katrina. I don't think we have time for questions. However, if you do have any questions, you can type them in the chat, and Amy can hang around for a moment and answer them while we move on to back to Gabby for the wrap up for the day.
Yeah,
thanks,
thank
Amy.
you. And thanks, Amy. I won't keep you all much longer. Just have a couple sort of wrap up housekeeping notes and reminders for tomorrow. But that concludes day one of Scholars Portal Days for this year. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you're able to come back tomorrow for day two. So a few reminders for that. If you are able to join us tomorrow, English programming will begin again at 12:30 Eastern Time, same time as today, same Zoom link as today. You can check out the agenda for day two on Spot Docs. I think there will be a link to that in the chat. We'll have updates on some Scholars Portal services. We'll have some more lightning talks. We're going to have an SP like open Q&A period where you're welcome to ask questions about anything Scholars Portal related. So on the presentations you hear tomorrow, but even on services or anything that we don't talk about in those updates, anything Scholars Portal related, bring your questions to that. And of course, everyone's fan favorite, the pet parade, will be back. Si vous parlez français, rejoignez-nous demain à 11h pour Scholars Portal Days en français. Les mises à jour en français sur les services de Scholars Portal et de Borealis. Mais veuillez noter que le lien d'enregistrement est pour joindre avec Zoom, c'est différent que le lien en anglais pour aujourd'hui et demain après-midi. Alors, vous devez enregistrer avec le lien dans les diapos ici et aussi dans le chat. So join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. for Scholars Portal Days en français if you speak French. But as I just said, just a note that if you do join, that if you would like to join that, the link to join that portion of the event is different than the English event link. So that's a little bit different from last year. You need to register separately for that one. It's a separate Zoom link that is linked in the slides here. I believe Sabina's dropped a link for that in the chat. So please make sure that you register for that if you would like to attend SP Days en français tomorrow, 11 a.m. If you aren't able to join us at all tomorrow, and today was your one and only Scholars Portal Days, please take a moment to fill out our feedback survey. Again, there'll be a link in the chat. If you're joining us tomorrow as well, you can wait and you can fill it out. Then you only need to fill it out once. And again, you don't have to fill it out. We would love you to do that, but yeah, just once is fine. If you have any questions at all, please just send us an email to help@scholarsportal.info, and we will be in touch. Otherwise, have a lovely evening, and we hope to see you all again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.